I see a world behind them. No more time. Sinking into the silence. Reaching out for something you may never find. Looking for a reason not to lose your mind. Feel like you're caught in a world you don't belong to. Praying that you'll make it home. I know you're scared that the place you love is gone. Don't feel what you do not know.
Happy Monday, everybody.
Yo! Hey, so Justin, to put into perspective how long it's been since I last used this laptop, which normally is, where I look at stuff when we're podcasting.
A couple times a week.
I just opened that up and saw a bunch of scans from Omni Magazine of dinosaurs having sex.
Oh, wow, yeah. That was
wow, that's a long time, Brian.
That was a lot. That was a
Many
lifetime
decades
ago that
ago.
we were talking about that on.
A Night Attack.
Yeah.
That's right. New episodes of Night Attack and Cord Killers coming back in 2020.
well, no, we have a new episode tomorrow.
Sorry, new live episodes.
New to them.
Well,
I mean, for us, it's weeks ago.
yeah. But hello, everybody.
Hey.
Get started here in just a couple minutes. Everybody have a good holidays, a good Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa.
Sure did. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I'm okay with the implied arc of season 2 of The Mandalorian. Like when they clearly defined the child as a foundling, and they were like, "Well, you know what that means? It means you have to train him, bro." And I'm like, I'm okay with all of this.
Well, I don't know.
No, he's too weak to train, right?
Yeah, no, that the are we want to ruin things for audience, or that's not the full sentence?
Maybe I missed it, but I was left with the impression that the second season arc would involve, him training the child to become a Mandalorian.
No, they said you need to find his people. Bring him back to them.
Okay, yeah, that's a quest so that they can begin the thing. But if the point is we want to get to a place, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I walked away thinking, because they said he's too weak to train, you need to find his own people, and he's like, I gotta find these Jedi,
Yeah.
or
I thought he was
enemies.
supposed to kill the kid. I have not watched the show yet.
Oh, you haven't seen any of it, huh?
No, my parents actually wanted Disney Plus, and so they paid me to get Disney Plus for them. And so now, while I was home, I set it up on all of their things. And so I downloaded the first few episodes, but I did not watch them yet. But I've listening to Spoiler in Time, and
You can't not know certain bits. I will say that
I hear Boba Fett is in this one.
Sure. Yeah. You know what? It's probably better if you go in thinking that. I have a soft spot for like my favorite part of Star Wars A New Hope is the 2 times that you catch stormtroopers just making stormtrooper chit chat. Where it's like, "Hey man, did you see the new bleedle blops on the fleep flings?" And this last episode of Mandalorian just had like an unbroken 7 minutes of like Kevin Smith's fantasy.
I was absolutely delighted by the first 4 minutes.
Exactly. It was 3.5 minutes too long, and then
I agree.
Okay.
Look, there was a great moment. It was a great thing. As soon as it became less of a fly on the wall discussion and more of a sketch comedy scene.
Well, remember Troops, the Star Wars parody? With
Yes,
Stormtroopers?
yes.
That became that.
As soon as it became that, I was like, okay, all right, hey, come on, here we
I
go,
loved it.
here we go.
I just have a bigger appetite for that than you guys because like the longer they went, the more I couldn't believe that they were going this long, and the more I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's one of those things that it's an artistic decision that I can see where people are on either side of it, and I'm happy to have the discussion about that. Chronologically, the last and only Star Wars.
Oh.
Yeah,
should we save any of this for the show?
Yeah,
Should
we
some
should
of
save-
this be
we-
part of the show?
Content. I don't know why we're talking about this before the recorded show.
Okay, all right,
Just
all right.
my quick takeaway was
Well,
last.
but
the last
what's your takeaway in the show?
Save-
though?
save it.
What's your takeaway in the show?
Save
though?
it.
What's your
You got your bit in. My point was understanding. Hey, this is a TV show, not a movie. It's a TV show, not a movie.
Yeah, I think it's been great since they've decided to make Star Wars a TV show.
takeaway? All right. Well, let's do the show here. I'm recording. My times are.
Palpatine.
All right, Andrew. I'm counting you in 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Justin Robert Young,
Hi.
Mr. Brian Brushwood,
Well, hello, you beautiful people.
and Mr. Bryce Castillo.
Hi, everybody. That's me. Holiday
Yes.
Bryce. is
Holiday
here.
Bryce.
Wow. Oh my God, a lot's changed.
That's
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Christ.
He's the jauntiest bounty hunter on the whole roster. Oh man, if I'm gonna get taken down by anyone, I'm glad it's Holiday Bryce. What a gift for me! Aw, it is
your
the
dad.
Festival of Lights.
Oh, wow. Deadly.
Pumpkin bites.
That's right. Hi, everybody.
Gentlemen, here we are. One more day, 2019, and however you want to count, defining it as the what was this decade? The teens? What was this decade? What are we calling it?
Yeah, I guess I think it took us 10 years, but in 2019 I finally got comfortable with calling it the aughts without rolling my eyes, or saying the turn of the century without thinking I'm putting on airs.
Yeah.
But the teens, I'm down with the teens.
I was all about the aughts. I was on the aughts early. I really like calling it the aughts because it's something that is so rarely said, right, in our common vernacular that is usually focused on the last few decades. But
What about
this one I
2020? Are you a linguistic purist? Can you handle the idea of calling it the 2010s? Because that's probably what I'll do.
Gun to my head, tell me what the decade was. I'd probably say either colloquially, I'd probably say the 2010s. I would probably I'd cast my vote for the 10s. I don't know about the teens though.
Yeah, once it felt right when I said it the first time, but the more I think about it, I think I would just at a gut level call it the 2000s, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s.
You want to hear a weird one that I just found? So this is csmonitor.com. An Australian competition came up with the name The Wonders.
The Oneaters.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to the Oneaters.
So we're all in agreement that like the 2019 was the last year of the decade. based upon the
Okay.
age.
Yeah, if we're getting into the whole, it's funny because my kids they've never been conscious for this debate, and we had it about as hard as you were going to have it at the end of the millennium. Or was it the millennium ending? Was it 2000 or 2001? And it's like, that's the loudest that dumb debate got. And the hardest, that's when I calcified and decided it's the time when the odometer flips. That's the best way to, who cares?
Well, and beyond that, functionally, this is a holiday and a celebration defined by a party and a gathering, right? So where is the biggest party and gathering going to be?
Is it going to be in 2000 or 2001?
Yeah, or similarly, is it going to be in the New Year's Eve between 2019 and 2020, or 2020 and 2021? And absolutely. The more fun party is going to be the one that happened in 1999. Prince made a song about it, and the one that's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, in our imaginary calendar that starts with the first year and not several hundred years later we go back, it would be like, well, okay, this would be year 1, not year 0, right? So the year would have the first year of the century, the decade or millennium would have a 1 in it. Wait, all right, I may have talked myself out of it now.
Well, I mean, so there's the argument is there's no year 0, right?
Right.
That is the rallying cry of this is not the end of the decade or millennium, people. To which I say, prove it.
Yeah.
Go.
Well, and
Find me definitive proof that at some point somebody wasn't like, either this is year 0 or probably more commonly, oh, remember that year before 1? Yeah, that was 0. And
Yeah.
also, I have a little thing up my sleeve in case you want to say no on both. I'm retroactively declaring that there was a year 0. So
well, also, it'd feel weird to talk about the 90s and mention, back in 2000, the 90s.
yeah,
Yeah.
get out of here.
Yeah. Hey,
So-
you know what? You just settled the debate. Anybody who wants to tell you that this is not the end of the decade, you're like, oh, great. So that means that 2000 was in the 90s? And then just patiently wait for them to be cool with that, which they won't. And then it's over with.
Yeah, there we go. It's been settled.
Man, that is the single most powerful shutdown of that argument that I've heard. That's amazing.
Well, you see, because the 90s is different than the decade, and I don't know. Let's just 220, guys.
Hey, man, you want to time travel through nostalgia and think about all the things that have changed since, 10 years ago this very day?
Like I do every time I pick up the remote control.
What do you mean? Just like
I don't
everybody's.
understand these things.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
What is the most defining technology of the 10s? What is when we look back?
It is. I'll tell you what. Let me start with what it's not. It is definitely not anything smartphone related. Like, functionally speaking, tell me there's anything different about your smartphone today versus 10 years ago. It's a thing you hold in your hand that you touch with your fingers that connects you to other people, that does emails and pictures. And what is it now? All those things. Nothing.
Andrew, you go, because I'm going to look something up.
I agree that the device, Brian, it's a bigger, faster, and I think we probably talked about that. What are we going to look forward to in the iPhone in 10 years? And I think we probably said, I think we said thinner too, which no, but I think the biggest thing is with all computers, the thing is what the software does. And as we reach the end of this decade, and you look at my niece was at the shopping mall. We're in Florida, and my niece was at a shopping mall, and she looks over and she says to my brother, says, "Dad, that's so and so, this family from YouTube. Can I go say hi?" And it was a super famous YouTube family that saw in the mall. And they went over and said hi. They're super nice people, all that. When my nieces sit in front of the TV, they pull up YouTube, and that's what they watch. Is they watch their favorite YouTube shows. Their stars are YouTube stars, maybe be some Disney, but it could be just as easily open up YouTube and watch this stuff. The littlest one, since she's 6 or 7, she knows it. She's got her favorite. YouTube existed 10 years ago, but was back that sort of niche sort of thing. And now, we're entering this decade where you look at the biggest stars are people like Billie Eilish, and other people who have made their name by SoundCloud. And really we saw the dream of the 2000s with social media and whatnot kind of be realized, and how your phone has become this nexus for all of this.
Can I conduct an experiment right now? I have a 12-year-old daughter. I could call her on the phone right now, and I can ask her to name however many of the 5 big broadcast networks. And I'm being generous because I'm going to include the CW in this.
The CW?
Well, yeah, it would be NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, and CW. Is there anybody else in I guess PBS maybe?
CW is not cable?
No. Oh, you didn't know that. That's amazing. CW used to be, get this, this is how old we are, UPN and
remember
the
UPN.
WB. And then they combined to be the CW.
The WB.
Yeah.
I remember we watched The Simpsons on the WB. Right, he's dialing
Yeah.
the phone.
So here we
Is
go. Brian, well, you do this. I have, without a doubt, the winner here.
Of
in
what
fact-
defines? Oh,
Of what
hey,
will
hey,
the
Josie.
technology define.
Sweetie, you're live on the internet. Dozens of people are hearing you.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. But here's the thing. Television, right? You know that there are TV stations, right?
Yes.
And you know that some are on cable and some are broadcast over the airwaves, right?
Yes.
Okay. How many? When I was your age, there were 3 big cable network or big broadcast channels, and then they added a 4th. How many of those can you name?
I don't know.
Can you name? Can
I
you
don't-
name any TV channels?
Any
That
channels
come over the
like
air. That come over the air.
Disney or something?
Well, Disney would be a cable channel. They do have a cable channel. How
I
many?
don't pay attention to this stuff.
Okay, but can you name like what's the biggest? If you were to guess, what's the biggest TV channel there is?
Broadcast. Yeah.
I don't know why.
Because we're talking about how different it is to be an old person like us versus a young person like you. What TV channel has Saturday Night Live on it? Have you ever
I
heard?
don't
Have you
know.
ever heard of Saturday Night Live?
I think we've got.
I guess I kind of know what you're talking about. Like,
Okay, all right. I love you. Bye.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Grandpa. What radio station network has the Lawrence Welk Show?
Yeah.
Can I still get the Colgate hour on this TV, or do I have to get an RF adapter?
Oh, it's so amazing to me.
Hey, what station is Fibber McGee and Molly on, Brian?
Oh, gotta get home. I'm about to miss Beaver.
The most popular show of its day. Amos and Andy. Okay.
Yeah.
What channel?
Oh my
What
god.
channel was Amos and Andy on? CBS.
One that would surely have to apologize in 2019. Is the answer to that. All right, here we go. Are you ready for it?
Yep.
This is I will go all in on this. The technology that the tens will be reminded for, and this is where I will directly contradict Brian Brushwood. What is different from your cell phone comparatively? 2011, the launch of Siri on the iPhone. I think that voice technology writ large, right, will be the thing that we look back on and say this was the defining thing. Because tell you what, I was all visiting family in Orlando, visiting family in Ohio. Everybody, a gift that we got to everybody were Amazon-enabled voice devices. Every single one of those kids that were toddlers the last time I saw them, and now all talk, they all interact. That is universally the first computer that they interact with. They are more comfortable with that than anything else because they don't know how to type. They don't have their own devices. They barely, even before they even know how to spell, they know how to talk to these devices. I think that will be, no matter what, the technological legacy of this decade.
Yeah, I would say, I guess just globally speaking, because that's detached from the cell phone. I mean, I guess it's just the digital assistant, the voice activated assistant.
Eventually, it got detached from the cell phone, but it began there, at least officially, as part of the core iOS in 2011. Although it was, I think, pre 2010, its own app.
Yeah.
10 years ago, not that I want to guide us into our crack cocaine that we can't let go of, but had SpaceX landed its first stages yet 10 years ago?
No, I actually found an article was like 7 years ago was when they were watching Grasshopper test.
Wow. Yeah, and I guess self-driving cars, Teslas for the masses, none of that happened.
Yeah, the Model S like started shipping in bulk in 2011 or something. I'd have to pull that up, but yeah, I'm just pulling up the Grasshopper. That was the Grasshopper was what SpaceX called the test stage that they used to figure out if it would work. The program for testing that began in 2012, and then would be, let's see what they did. Like their first test.
By the way, here, while you look that up, I just got an updated text from Josie saying, wait, like NBC or something? I don't know. Or Fox? I'm just naming things.
Good.
Yep, that was,
got it.
That was the game.
She got there.
Found it. I bet she Googled it.
2012 was when they had the first test of the grass, and that's a pretty amazing achievement to think that we went from 7 years ago to now, and it's a normal thing. I think that's one of the things that sort of overall, just a step away from the phone, that struck me was how quickly certain things can happen in technology when the right team and the right focus is on it. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, man.
used-
Even more impressive than that first time they landed the first stage. Like, I will remember where I was when I saw 2 of those first stages on the what was it, the I forget which one's called what, big rocket land simultaneously. That was amazing. Falcon Heavy, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. The Model S started shipping in 2012. So I would say that's a big difference too. Is it like, we had Priuses everywhere. Prius is a super popular car, but for fully electric, other than if you may have seen like a Chevy Volt back in the day, now in LA, it's normal. If I go stand on the corner and wait long enough, I will see Tesla passing by, in California, and I'm seeing that more elsewhere. So.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, my neighborhood, which has a staggeringly high number of window break-ins, still you could see Teslas being parked on the street because people really want to own Teslas, even if they might get their windows broken in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a huge, a huge factor. I mean, and really, what that I think the tens will largely be remembered for is the aughts saw the shattering of the monoculture, and the tens saw the beginning of like the fiefdoms and what is both good and bad of what could come from that, including companies that just kind of came out of nowhere, that would happen, with even bigger results than could have been happened before.
Yeah, I've been thinking about. We've talked about the shattering of the monoculture before, but I suspect that we might be seeing kind of a reassembly of it because my kids don't know where these movies come from. That the memes that they know originated. But they know that they're universally spoken throughout all of their communities, and whether it's in their highly fragmented Discord environments or in the more universal Reddit type environment, I don't know. I get the vibe that we're sort of recoalescing, much like Earth after getting smashed by the planetoid that became the moon. I feel like everything's reassembling.
I think that now our fiefdoms feel more like a monoculture because the population is up. And there are certainly elements of, the current generation has a tremendous appreciation for the past in a way that I think even us growing up could have never really understood, because you got all these kids that, like, you ask yourself, why is Friends or anything with these gigantic back catalogs going for the kind of streaming rights fees that they are getting? And the answer is, kids go through everything that they want to watch on Netflix and Hulu and now Disney Plus, and they are just there for more stuff. And so now what looks exciting? Well, not this 6-episode peak television thing that we were all super excited for because we were tired of the deluge of 23 episodes of a comedy series where barely anything happens. They just want content. And so now Friends, built in this era where it's a 30-minute comedy show that they made 25 to 30 episodes a season of, that's the kind of meal that they really want to enjoy. They want to sit down and soak into this a different era of comedy. And that's fascinating.
I'll tell you what, man, there's a value to To beige. There's a value to beige. There's like, we want something that everybody in the family can agree is pretty good, and we all like it for different reasons. And right now we're having a blast going through the back catalog of finally watching Parks and Recreation, and it's the one show that our whole family gathers together in one room to sit and watch 4 or 5 episodes at a time.
I mean, think about Everybody Loves Raymond. That was the same thing. It was just a later in that wave, but I think that will probably find its way somewhere too in a similarly big. I mean, Everybody Loves Raymond. The reruns of that show did insanely well on TV.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, they talk about that as like 4 quadrant, like hitting all 4 quadrants and things like that do that. Before and always will, probably, like Stranger Things will resonate, with everybody.
Yeah, with the four quadrants being young, old, boy, girl. So
Yeah.
if you can appeal to young, old, across the gender gap, then that's your like big money.
It's watching Mandalorian, and my niece hadn't seen it yet. My niece is like 7 years old, and it's funny is the opening starts, and then she turns to my brother, her dad, and goes, "What's with the intro?" Because it was so short. Like, 7-year-olds commenting on the intro. What's with the intro? I'm like, oh, jeez.
By the way, that intro that plays before that intro that plays before every episode of The Mandalorian, you see, lights going around, you see a droid face, you see a stormtrooper face, you see a Vader face and all that stuff. And I just remember, I think I've only gotten John to watch just the first couple of episodes, but like, as that's happening, he says, "Ah, yes, Disney leaning fully in to their ability to make people identify with characters to which they don't have to ever pay royalties." Because like, that's why they put everybody in a mask, is because you don't have to pay residuals to a mask.
Well, yeah, I mean, they do buyouts. That's why they do action figures, stuff like that. But also, it's like, it's easier to you merchandise the thing that you're not worried about, showing up in a scandal too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, don't speak too soon. We are not. I would not be shocked if our the Roaring 20s includes this, cocaine and booze fueled BB-8 scandal.
Oh, I got to show you in Orlando, where they're pushing Galaxy's Edge really hard. They had a big push for Star Wars: The Rise Galaxy's Edge. And this is when you go to get on the train. This is in the shuttle at the airport. This is what you see:
a bunch of stormtroopers with First Order banners.
Space Nazis. Welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like literally going, they're called stormtroopers because, stormtroopers and trains are not a connection that I would want to make in anybody's head.
Oh, that's terrible. I
the
should
space
stop
trains
laughing.
run on time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, where is this going? Where is this train going?
I mean, I've always had very confused. I've just stood there with my mouth agape as Disney just increasingly leans in on the merchandising rights to, the galaxy's greatest murderers. They're genocide machines, and I'm just like, okay.
I mean, look, dude, whatever sells. they're there for. They're going to look at that spreadsheet and they're going to see who's moving units, and they're going to be more of them.
I was very curious. I just thought I'd pull up my mail and see if I could like pull up something from like 2010. Just to see like 32,000, just to see what was going on in my life at that point. Some app stuff I was working on. Shocker. Let's see, like literally.
Where was your literary career back in 2010?
Non-existent.
Wait, you hadn't even begun? I thought you had started writing by then. No, I guess not.
No.
Because we were only like a year into NSFW when you started doing novellas and stuff. So you're saying everything that has happened. Guys, I'm starting to think that a lot can happen in 10 years.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
When was Grendel's Shadow published? March 25th, 2011. So you weren't far away
I like that he just fact checked me. I'm like, no, it wasn't until a year later. Like, no, we're gonna check you, sir.
Well, no, I'm curious because I remember this very vividly. It was on a plane ride back to Florida, to South Florida from Austin. We did
sitting at the airport. Yeah.
we did a South by Southwest, and then you started sketching out. I think you even showed me the beginnings of it on the plane, if I remember correctly. But then you finished it really quick because this is not far away from South by that year. I mean, it might have been a week and a half later that it went up.
So I pull up one thing. Let me see if I can go full screen on this. One thing to see, like, oh, what's in my email? And I see a thing that says album big, and this is what it is. This is from literally 10 years ago today.
Oh, wow.
Oh no, wait. This is
10
Andrew's
years, right shoulder.
9 years ago. 9 years ago.
That's his microphone. That's like an okay microphone. Oh yeah, the Weird Things logo.
I believe
podcast.
still the current album art.
It's a little different than
Yeah.
that, but that's about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me holding, 10 years of me holding that stupid machete the wrong way.
It's okay. I'm sure my candle's burned out. So I would say that we've talked about things that obviously the bigger sort of changes. So I'd say voice assistance was a big thing. I think that, certainly, like we said, for areas where seeing usable electric cars that you would average person might want, I think has been a big change. Reusable rockets. So the decade gave us voice assistance, reusable rockets, electric cars. The awareness from other people that social media has, a double edged, it's
Yeah, that was really, if you look at the stories that were being written about Facebook, and let's draw a tight circle around politics for the time being, but the stories written about Facebook in 2010 versus the ones that will be written in 3 days in 2020, it was largely about, in politics, it was what an amazing data acquisition tool it was, and how this was the future of politics, and how the Obama reelection campaign was going to unveil the highest the attention to detail on exactly which house in a neighborhood. I wish I need to find these articles, but I remember specifically one of them saying that they would be able to tell the house in the neighborhood that if they were able to change their mind to put a sign out on their front door, they would be able to, or on their front lawn, they'd be able to flip the neighborhood statistically. Now, I don't know how much of that was real, how much of that was just kind of spin being told to political reporters who were definitely not tech reporters. But compare that to the I think we're at 2 congressional appearances by Mark Zuckerberg, and I doubt that he will escape this decade without seeing at least 3 or 4 more. This is definitely a different world.
Yeah, they didn't have their IPO till 2012.
Wow. Yeah,
And,
this was, 2010. We're still at, the beginning of, that was still we were closer to remember beer diplomacy?
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. In fact, I just went back and I found this gem from October 2009. So I guess what, 2 months and 10 years ago, we got our first comment on the Weird Things podcast. Rabbit Hussein Badger wrote, "This was an awesome first episode. Smart, funny, and well-structured. Andrew is an awesome, well-prepared host and seems to be the only human on Earth able to contain Brian and Justin to a large extent." And how much has changed? That's also 10 years ago we did the Houdini seance, If anybody was tuned in live for that, we definitely factually shoved
true.
our success right in the face of James Randi as we contacted the delightful spirit of Houdini.
You know, I know we kind of talked about phones a little bit as maybe not having changed much in terms of offering in the past 10 years, but phones and also tablets have really become new alternatives are not the right word, but new ways of doing things that you would do on, say, a full computer, a laptop, a desktop, or something, and bring the price and availability of those tools down. You know, an iPad is cheaper than some so laptops, and you can probably get as much done on it with different software. But
Tell you what, man, my 15-year-old, no interest in. She has multiple laptops, no interest in any of them. She will lose her mind if I take away her iPad. Like, even though she can access all the same groups and do the same work and do the same everything, it's the iPad is special in a way that that the computers are not.
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, please.
I mean, that is one thing that definitely, futurists at this time a decade ago, certainly at Google, were very, very bullish on the idea of everything being accessed from the internet, right? And that's what the future would be is less and less hardware, less and less computing power locally, more and more computing power in the cloud, and that the physical thing that you would need would therefore be able to be lighter and cheaper. Indeed, trend-wise, that happened. I don't know if it quite happened as fast as Google maybe would have wanted it to happen, and I think we're still probably another few years away. We are at least ubiquitous, super fast internet away from it being something that everybody like kind of hits, I think, a tipping point in terms of a mass scale. But certainly the trend lines are there, and that's, I think, a lot of the reason why tablets have become more and more functional is that now the pain of changing devices is so much less because so much of what we do every single day is in the cloud.
Yeah, it's just interesting. That's one of those devices. It's such an everyday part of what I do. Most of my computing is probably on my iPad, and I think that was April 2010 when that was introduced, and how much that's taken over. And when I travel, I'll bring a little Fire tablet. One of the Amazon, they're like $50 because it has built-in Alexa. And so if I just want to listen to my audiobooks or whatever, I just use that as an alarm clock, whatever, plug it in. For $50, it's a great little travel thing. And that's something I think that I have the latest model iPad, which I love, which is great, and it's worth it. But I also have one of these little cheap tablets because there's certain things where I just if I need a computer to do a thing, it doesn't have to be smart about it, I'll just use one of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the cloud really is, though, a big part of it. I remember Chris Anderson's book Free, which I highly recommend going back and checking out again. I reread it a little while ago and had a nice little exchange with him on Twitter, and I think I talked about this on here. The one thing I'll say is he questioned whether or not Facebook was worth as much as like $1 billion or $3 billion. He was skeptical of that, and I think that maybe that probably would have been so when you couldn't understand the full scope of the advertising model that it was going to be embraced. But Chris was fully on board with the idea of what was going to happen to cloud services, and that's such a huge part now of the way we do things when we pick up our phone and what we do, what's going on behind the scenes, how much is not done on the phone and how much is done there, besides just, storing your photos and things like this. So many of the things when you open up an app and you log in, everything's being handled on some cloud service, not even a central server. So much of that's just being run behind the scenes in no place you can specifically point at and say, oh, here's our location facility where this is run from. It's going to be AWS services or Google Firebase doing authentication. So I think that's a big story. And the price is like, you can start these things for nothing. You can start these services for next to nothing, and then as they build up, it costs. But we are certainly seeing that the invisible hand affecting pricing for things that don't cost much.
That is a huge thing. Is just also not only in terms of how we interact with stuff, but also in the bottom lines of all these businesses. Is that cloud computing, AWS, Azure, everybody who got into that game in the aughts. Really, and even like Microsoft that really went hard into it during the 10s, they fully realized that they were selling cement in the 50s. Like they are selling the base ingredient for anything that you would want to do, be it a road, a residential home, or a skyscraper. Like everybody needs to get this digital good to build whatever they want.
Yeah. And I think the lesson too was that disruptors can come from anywhere. That, we watched Dropbox became a big company, even though the threat was always, oh, Google's going to do this, Google's going to do this. And we realized that big companies can't do everything really well. And just like recording companies, as far as picking who's going to be a star, I mentioned Billie Eilish before. You've got Post Malone. This is a guy who learned how to play music on playing Rock Band, and is a superstar. And that's the amazing thing to me. And not because somebody saw him playing in some club in Texas and said, I'm going to make you a star, kid. SoundCloud releasing stuff. It was fan made, fan delivered, and that's the most wonderful thing I think about this decade.
I mean,
so many of our stars weren't made stars by gatekeepers. They were people like you guys, who put stuff out there, kept putting it out there, and the fans chose you.
Well, and really there is a sad, the saddest story to tell in that for this decade was the fact that you had this gigantic boom of SoundCloud rappers, and many of which died at 21. It was fairly reminiscent of the 90s when you had all the heroin overdoses and grunge, where this like the explosion of a genre dovetailed with the a bunch of younger people kind of getting maybe more money and more exposure. Now in the 90s, obviously that is complicit on some level with the studio system and all the labels and everything, and people trying to compete to stay up with where they were going to be. And certainly that plays a part here, but the fact that you've seen so many of those guys either die of an overdose or gang violence or something like that is really, really disheartening. But it, to me, is the defining sound of the decade. Even pop music sounds like SoundCloud rap now.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to get more of that. I still try to wrap my head around, like, you get people like, Ninja and some of these other people who are, I'm barely aware of, but within their own culture are just giants, and the power of that, and you flip through on Netflix and you'll see like, Kevin Hart talking to him, and the crossover between these self-made people and kind of traditional stars. Yeah.
And now it'll be very interesting to see where some of that goes, because to Brian's point about the monoculture kind of re-emerging, you are certainly seeing at least power players that are spending monoculture money on the talent, and they're spreading it all around. And obviously Ninja went to Microsoft's streaming platform for an exclusive deal for a lot of money with like a 2-year exclusivity agreement, which is insane. You're seeing that with YouTube. You're seeing that with Facebook to another degree. And it's amazing just to see the kind of cash that is getting thrown around there.
Yeah, I'll throw in it. And I think that part of what's happening is that, and to Brian's point about monoculture maybe making sort of a comeback, is because it's much more responsive, where it's the ones that kind of hit are the ones that kind of hit that 4 quadrant or whatever. And it's harder for, like, if you're NBC to say, we're going to make a thing that everybody's going to talk about. It's much harder to do that. But you do see the sort of organic things coming up. And how many times has somebody mentioned to me, hey, did you see the guest on Jimmy Kimmel or Colbert or whatever the other night? Did you hear this? Zero times in the last year has anybody said this to me. Did you see so-and-so on there? The number of times I hear per week, hey, Joe Rogan, do you hear what Joe Rogan had this guy? Joe Rogan had this person on there. And that might be the bubble I'm in, but...
Oh, no. I mean, Joe Rogan is legitimately the loudest voice of 2019 on podcasting, full stop. If people are listening to something in their ears, there's a decent chance that either it's Joe Rogan or somebody about to be on Joe Rogan.
Well, yeah. I mean, dude, that talk about... Rogan might be actually the man of the tens. If anybody who would say, no, the guy from Fear Factor, no, wait, the guy from News Radio was going to be the male Oprah and have that level of impact is insane. And what's fascinating is that he really is, especially in this specific Democratic primary, he is a gatekeeper for political relevance. The campaign of Andrew Yang was almost entirely launched by his Joe Rogan interview. Similar with Bernie Sanders re-emerging and running again. Obviously, he was already a known quantity from 2016, but everybody goes and does it, and it'll be curious to see who goes and does it by the end of this election cycle.
Yeah, I don't really want to get into so much in this, but man, there was that a very critical article. Was it in?
Oh, I believe it was Slate or Salon or
Yeah.
whatever. That it was just a hit piece on Rogan that I found it was very bizarre. It left a very bad
Slate,
taste in
yeah.
my mouth. It seemed
That's
Yeah,
insane. I would expect more of Slate than to do some kind of clickbait. The thing you like is really bad. Kind of journalism. So out of
Well,
character.
I of course. I mean, they're not the Slate and Salon. There's degrees of difference there, but yeah, it was Slate. But I guess my thing was like, I'm not like I would call myself a fan of. I don't think I've ever listened to the whole broadcast or whatever. But the sort of the idea define them like it's this sort of right wing thing. Maybe I mean I'm sure maybe, but like as you pointed out, like I've had more people have come to me and said, oh, you had Bernie Sanders on, and Bernie Sanders did a really good job of communicating or Yang or and I said, yeah, I think that's the strength of it, is that I have people say, oh, yeah, I liked hearing those people talk on the show, and not because, the tear down they did. No, it was just this like, once you just sort of take them away from the podium and let these people talk and be real people, then they're more interesting. And so I thought that was when I read the article. I'm like, this is not my takeaway from this. But
Yeah. As it turns out, and this is why I do think the more we talk about it, the more I definitely think that Rogan is somebody that you should think about in terms of a zeitgeist definition of this decade, is that you never really know where that center point is going to be. The person whose point of view is going to resonate with the most amount of people. And the reason why I like comparing him to Oprah is that Oprah existed in this time where being the black friend to a predominantly white female audience that was smart and funny, but also had these incisive interviews where you were sure that she was going to get a little bit more out of it, but wasn't as tawdry as a Jerry Springer or anything like that. She was that for an age, and obviously still is super powerful. For Joe Rogan, apparently the 2010s was the stoner MMA guy, right? who's more intellectual than you might think, but more curious than he is interested in bragging about how smart he is, and just kind of wants to sit there and ask questions, and also isn't afraid to be stupid. I don't think that it's I think that it is part of his origin story that the things that we were talking about Joe Rogan 10 years ago were about, he's a moon landing denialist, right? And it wasn't necessarily because you thought that he was going to lead or as it turned out, he didn't lead, a march on Washington to demand that they release the moon landing hoax tapes. He was just a stoner MMA guy who was like, I don't know, man, it seems possible. I've seen a lot of these sets. They look like stuff. And then talks to people and has these conversations and then comes out saying, yeah. I mean, I guess we definitely landed on there then, and then moved on. And that is a fascinating element of our every bit of information is in the cloud. And we can always find it. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to take the steps to do it.
I am specifically really fascinated by the fact that he basically was doing the same thing for almost a decade, and then just in the last year and a half, his stuff super exploded. And I don't know if that's a matter of behind the scenes, they got better at booking, or if they codified sort of the exact nature of his ability to, in a Howard Stern-like manner, get people to open up and have them start, talking in a way that they don't get the opportunity to do. I've heard various incarnations of this word, but they talk about podcasting in general, and a few people specifically as being part of like an intellectual dark web, where the idea is like you can just say things differently and express ideas over 2 hours that you cannot put into a tweet. There's no there's no physical way to convey the idea in a tweet that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, and he's not a gotcha interviewer, and I respect that whole, hey, I don't know, and then like his opinions changing on stuff or whatever, where we live in an age where people double down on a thing, and then we've seen that political stuff, that things that we thought were true, and pundits sort of doubling down and insisting on this to the point that you realize that, man, they're never gonna admit they're wrong, and which there's certainly a value to that in some spaces, but also not morally. But here a guy like, yeah, no, tell him, oh, okay, now, and then the next podcast guest changes his mind on something else. I mean, there's something genuine about that, I guess.
Yeah, and to your point, Brian, granted, I'm not a listener to Joe Rogan, so if people are hardcore listeners, want to tell us how the episodes have evolved, I tend to think that it's really just the tide receded to the point where all of a sudden he's this massive influencer. If you look around, where else are you going to find somebody like this? I don't know if anybody was quite had that same idea that he did. I mean, certainly Mark Maron had a version of that for stand-up comedians, and then eventually branching out into a lot of other people. But I think his heart was always in acting. He would rather win an Academy Award than be Oprah. And Joe Rogan's like, no, I'll take this gig, and then I'll also just interview people who just got knocked out in an MMA ring. That's gonna be my gig.
I am really surprised looking at how many names I recognize from current list of top podcasts that were also there in the very early days of emerging podcasts. And some of them are old media folks that you would expect. Others of them are, kind of quirky newbies in 2009 that here in 2019 are now powerhouses.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot more of traditional media making its way into podcasting, because it's kind of become, it's internet radio and whatnot. And we see that, but I remember years ago, like when watching back in the Twit days, one of Leo's concerns was that, like, hey, we have this thing called podcasting, it's ours. We don't really, and I'm paraphrasing, I apologize, but basically, like, the fear of big media coming into it, and then sort of we would lose this thing, where I kind of think that, like, I think this thing exists because there's things that big media just can't do or won't do or doesn't understand or is too slow to do. And there's going to be a world where there's all these things. And I think that's where we are now. We're in a world where we have all the things. You have, NBC Universal producing podcasts, and then you have some guy in their basement, or whatever, producing stuff that's ranking right up there. And, it's such a level playing field. So, anybody could have a chance at all with your support.
Yeah, man. Look, anybody can have a chance. Thanks. Oh, you know how I how I define the 2010s is the launch of patreon.com/weirdthings. Head on over to patreon.com/weirdthings. Keep us live and independent. Just $1 an episode. If you enjoy us talking about weird things, we'd like to keep on talking about weird things. One way to keep us talking about weird things is to pay us to talk about weird things. So head on over to patreon.com/weirdthings. Sign up. Just $1 an episode.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to do predictions for the next decade?
Oh, man. Dude, I mean, why not? It's not like we're ever held to account on any of these.
No.
You know what? Predictions get a lot tamer as you get older and have a bigger perspective. Creeping up on getting ever so close to half a century here. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know. A new iPhone will be slightly faster than the old iPhone. A new 18-year-old will become the hit singer, songwriter, lyricist.
Well, that's the stuff to come out tomorrow kind of predictions. Like, yeah, sure, but let's be bold. Let's be brave.
What would we not expect? I'm trying to think of anything.
Do you? I've got one.
Yeah.
To get us started, and I don't know if it's too already in the teens or not. But I know I got an Apple Watch for Christmas, and it feels like with tech and fitness and health stuff, I think that'll continue to blossom into this larger and larger ecosystem. I feel like wearables will be, I've got NFC chips in my house. that you can do all sorts of automation on these devices.
Well, you know
smart
what?
homes.
Actually, here's a bold prediction, and it's you just inspired me. In 2020, there will be a data dump and a succession of news articles about maladies that almost certainly X, Y, or Z famous person has due to like looking at
just a
these
large
sleep
scale
rhythms,
HIPAA thing?
looking at this heart rate, looking at this whatever. I can confidently say, as an armchair person reading this data dump leak, that Greg Grunberg has diabetes or whatever.
Nobody tell Greg.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
mean,
Don't take Greg's
That
word.
is an interesting that's an interesting idea. That the next, like leak of nudes or something like that comes off a cloud because a password is hacked. That could be, that this person has high blood pressure and might have a heart attack, just as much as it's going to be, naked pictures sent from one person to another.
yeah. In fact, I would say, as a larger trend, that's what we're going to be more scared of than the idea of somebody's getting a picture of our genitals.
Well, and I mean, we even see some of this where Facebook is starting to roll out some of their own healthcare tools and services. I saw an
Nothing
interesting
to
thing.
worry about.
Well, and I saw an interesting thing about this on Twitter today, that if you give Facebook your health data, that data is not protected under, say, HIPAA. So
Oh my God.
I don't even know why you would
How-
tell Facebook that you had a blood pressure test or a pap smear, but you can.
How innocuous would it seem to test your blood pressure? Thanks. Now I know your blood pressure. That's some pretty heavy duty stuff. You get a few
And think
data
about this.
points on that. You can tell an awful lot.
Think about this. This Facebook is also doing dating.
Yeah.
Ooh. Oh my God. So
Yeah.
so now all of a sudden you get a nefarious app that says, "Hey, we noticed that you just entered a relationship with so and so. We have vital medical information about so and so that you could pay $20 to unlock, and we will give it to you." Oh.
Or beyond that,
don't think they'll
just
quite-
guiding, sending people to different people with different health.
Yeah.
Eugenics.xyz. Like, who knows why these two services on the same company could integrate in.
I had a very creepy experience where I have a eczema, right? And so I did a search did a search on that. And I never, because I was looking up some other treatment or something like this. And so I did a search on that. And then I click over to another web page, and of course the ad network thing came into play. It was a news site. I've never had this happen before. A complete full screen, full page pop up for some skin drug pops up.
Oh,
right?
Jesus.
I'd have covers the whole page. I can't even find the thing to click it to close it because it's there somewhere, but it was like a full page thing took over. I'd never seen anything like that. And I'm like, man, this must be an expensive drug because what they're paying for this site to do that is huge. And that was creepy. It was like the Google search bar, which I'm going to go type this thing into search. And of course, boom, you click on a link and now they know you're looking at this stuff. That was just weird. It was like the full page ad.
It is.
come up.
Maybe that's the biggest change from 2010 to 2020 is at the beginning of 2010, going into incognito mode was to surf pornography. Now 2020, going into incognito mode means I'm about to ask about some medical conditions because I do not want all that targeted stuff.
I do go into incognito mode when I want to type in stupid questions. I don't want Google to
Duck,
know.
duck,
I
go
don't
and
know.
incognito, man.
I don't want Google to know.
It's
I
time.
don't know what a suitcase is.
All right, so here's my prediction.
Mm.
Offline computing.
Oh,
I think that we will see a new and bigger resurgence in think of a Amazon Echo that has enough computing power and enough data about your home, but is not connected to the internet, and can do certain.
Oh, that's
things for you.
interesting. So like the regular Amazon Echo might be, yeah,
has to
30,
send
50
everything
bucks or
home.
whatever. But then there's a $300 or $400 or $500 version that it's like, no need to. Yeah, but even then, I don't know that I'd trust it. That would be really.
because
Well,
you'd have
I
to
don't
imagine it
I
would
don't
have
think
to get
people trust
updates
it
or
from
something.
Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is something where you can do private things, and then maybe every once in a while there is a supervised connection to some kind of like a internet thing, so it can get relevant data, but it comes in carts, that you plug into it. But there is no connection. It can't spit anything back out to the web.
I could see something like that. If voice recognition, if there becomes an open enough voice recognition thing that they can load into an offline device, and you just do it for offline stuff like timers or home automation, I bet we could see something like that in the next
Because
5 years.
There are a few right now. There's Mycroft.ai, which is an open source version of a virtual assistant, and then there's some other services and stuff they're trying to do. There's been some Kickstarters for like completely like Raspberry Pi based, stuff.
So yeah, I'm my big prediction is I think that we see some of the bigger companies, even the companies that sell money on sell ads, will see that there is as we become more distrustful of being followed around, which again, a decade ago we all knew was happening, but apparently everybody figured it out in the intervening 10 years. That will become something that people want more. That will be exciting, that they want to do certain kinds of searches and certain kinds of computations on something that does not feed back out.
I completely understand why you would make that prediction, but I suspect that there's just a generation of kids growing up without any expectation of privacy, and I suspect that it's humans that will change faster, that rather than request that the tech change to them.
Well, maybe think about it from like a corporate point of view, where let's say, you're going to get to a point where Amazon's going to offer, Chipotle, like their own voice assistant tech to be used into kitchens or employees or whatever. And you're going to get companies say, yes, we want these services, but we need to know that they're secure and they're private and whatever, and it's our own. We want to have our own AI systems that we're doing that. And I can see from a company point of view where it would be beneficial where you to do that,
Yeah, I mean, and Brian, don't think of it as a Luddite thing. Think of it as a technological progression. That now that there is the technological computing ability, and there are the neural networks that can create a home device that is powerful enough to make it worth your while.
Yeah, and I guess that becomes sort of like, once you have the means to afford that, all things being equal, why wouldn't you spend a few $100s to have like an AI bot sort of like, hey, I'm going to create an account for you. It'll be a clean account on Google. For every time you Google search for diabetes, I'm also going to search for 75 other maladies. That way Google won't know which of these are the ones that you're really afraid of. So basically a middling agent to anonymize everything.
But that's what Apple does with their when you use their services, is that they do these sort of like anonymized. That's one of they try to anonymize data, is by doing a bunch of spurious sort of other queries and stuff.
And also, Brian, you are always the guy who is looking to the bright, gleaming star above of the AI that just tells you what to do, that knows you better than you know yourself, that knows your family better than they know themselves, and can make the little recommendation that changes everything before anything else happens. This is where I think we're going with the offline computing, is that once, like, so let's just take a look at, like, okay, well, when your doors open and close, when your kids come and go, when the stuff goes rotten, there are certain elements to that in our world now that we look at as like, this is something that I'm going to think twice about bringing that into my home. And you're right, maybe we'll get to the point where we don't care about that anymore, but maybe you can say, all right, look, the idea of an AI being very aggressive about how you can deal with your life better that isn't connected to the internet might eventually be more, you might be willing to turn a few more dials and experiment a little bit more about something that knows everything about you, that knows when you tossed and turned in a way that doesn't require a thing, that you can just put a little pad under your mattress and it will know every little element and will be able to be more personal. Because I guess that's where I think we're going to the her world. We're going to the world where the AI is going to be very personal to us. And so my thought experiment is that some of that will be eased along by not being connected to the internet.
Yeah, I'm very on board with the sentiment. I just feel like it'll still be connected to the internet, but there'll be some payment structure that makes it make sense to act as a firewall, to act as the go-between between us and the internet. And I think we're in the same neighborhood. I think we're both describing the same human impetus, but I suspect it'll be very connected to the internet, just in a way that we trust to obfuscate our private life.
So I on that line, like I'm breaking down my little list of predictions here, and I think AI will be weird and annoying. You know, we saw that with that. Remember, Google did that voice call where they called the restaurant and had the AI like, "Hello, we want to find out what time you're closed," and they didn't quite realize they're talking to a person. And some people are like, "Hey, that's really weird and maybe invasive," and other people are like, "Hey, it's the future. Get with it." We're gonna see more of that. You know, AI robocallers, all that sort of stuff. You know, and then the dark use of the tech is going to be really, really good phishing, attempts and stuff like this. That because it's going to say, "Oh, I know Brian on Twitter," and it's going to fake an email from Brian to me that's going to read exactly like a Brian email because an AI could generate a lot of these. And we talked about, the way deep fakes, things like this, all of that's going to make us very unsure of who we're talking to, which could create the need for like firewalls and stuff like really intelligent AI systems to say like, "Hey, there are 5 things wrong with this. I don't think this is Brian. There's several things going on here, raise the alarm." And I think we're going to need, I think phone numbers are going to become.
Just a quick side jag. Man, am I really impressed in a world where 2019 saw 4 of my credit cards compromised at various times. It very quickly became not even a thing. Like there have been a few minor inconveniences where I wanted to pay with something and I had to call a number and say, "Hey, are you really trying to buy that?" "Yeah, I am." "Okay, great." But like, man, they are investing a lot to stay one step ahead because, of course, credit cards, by the way, if anybody steals your credit card, if anybody spends your money, and no matter how much it is, you are not liable for any of it. Credit card companies know this. They understand that it's better and cheaper for them to invest in the statistical analysis to figure out in what looks like people testing out credit card numbers that may or may not be compromised. It's remarkable how weirdly it's much, much safer today than it was 10 years ago, which doesn't really think about that.
That's a good point. You have that Apple Card, and that's like, I don't even think about it now because it's just, the way you can generate the new credit card numbers and stuff, and every transaction shows up on the phone, which is, I think we'll see more of that, like communications and stuff. On the other sense, like I think AI content, I think that we're going to see, we're watching like one of the amazing things about Mandalorian to me is the big VFX thing. So much of the VFX we saw were done because of Unreal Engine. A basic video game engine is used to drive the environments and stuff we see. And that crossover of that tech is kind of fascinating. And we're going to see, I think, a lot more of that. We might find like, Rise of Skywalker brought back Carrie Fisher, and I thought that I think they're using sort of old school tech to do that stuff for what some of the scenes they've tried to do it, and not sort of the newer generation stuff. But I think when we start seeing the newer generation stuff, we're going to find out like, oh yeah, no, this whole scene was all we just had an AI put the 2 actors there and we add the voices to it. We're going to see more and more of that coming up. And maybe, we'll start feeding something Last Airbender cartoons and stuff, and now we can just give it a script and the AI can produce it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. That didn't seem like a crazy thing to say.
I know.
That's the funny thing.
No.
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you look at where we came from with CGI.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be a lot of verbiage that we used at the beginning of this decade of being excited. "Oh God, I hate it when too much CGI. It looks like garbage." Like that was a thing that was said a lot at the beginning of the decade. Now said a lot less. And I think that will continue to evolve. Obviously, there will always be people who make things that look not great, right? But I think I'm with you, Andrew, that the scope of how we use these things will continue to mushroom.
Yeah, and that's I guess the hard part is hard to figure out something to say that's going to be crazy. You know, I think this decade VR for real, and VR drugs.
VR drugs? Do you mean drugs that enhance your VR experience?
Got any?
Man, that was actually one of my favorite ideas in the, I don't know if it was in the book version, but in the movie version of Minority Report. You know, obviously the main character sort of, you know, pining for his lost child is watching essentially immersive home movies under the influence of a drug that really makes him feel like he's there. That, man, if you're holding, then, you know, we could teleport over. We can make this happen.
Well, there's that thing that happens when we dream, that some part of our brain sort of suspends disbelief, you know, and takes the most abstract sort of thing and accepts it's real. Like you dream you're in a car. There are no door handles. There's nothing to it. It's just the idea of a car, and your brain's like, yeah, I'm in a car. No reason to question this. You know, somebody starts to package that, put that in a drug, and you strap on your Oculus Quest 2.0.
For just one brief moment. So yeah, and of course with dreams, what happens is number one, there's a paralytic drug that your brain releases so that you don't actually get up and run around and do stuff. And then at some level, it suppresses the urge to question what's going on. You just roll with everything. But then there's that, this is why having a dream journal works, is because the moment you wake up, your brain goes to work saying, okay, it's not helpful to have all of these conflicting memories. Let me scrub all of this. And that's why if you have a dream journal and you write it down in that brief, foggy 30 seconds after you wake up, then you won't remember the actual dream, but you will remember the process of remembering it as you write it down, which is very close to that. So the idea that you could get the immersion of a dream and yet have that as a fantasy memory that continues to live in your mind, that would be amazing.
We know that the other thing about the dream thing is it's and I'm sure you're giving sort of the thumbnail, but like it doesn't even erase the dream. It just sort of kind of like old school, just erases the top of the directory. Because how many times have you had it where you're driving along or something, all of a sudden you remember vividly some environment or some place in a dream you probably had like 7 years before.
Sure. And in fact, many people have had the experience of deja vu. I think I've always had it slightly differently, because when I have a deja vu, it's never that this has happened before. It's always under the framework of me believing, no, I had this dream. And then I try to remember what happened next. And of course, I never get it right. But yeah, man, those are going to be really good drugs.
Yeah. We can next week. We'll talk about a new quantum worlds theory called MIW, multiple interacting worlds. Instead of just multiple worlds theory, the idea of multiple interacting worlds.
So not only that, so multiple worlds theory is the idea that anything that has a non-zero chance, there's a splinter of reality that goes that way. But in that version, it's forever splintering and they're all independent threads. This one, there's actually interaction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll say that.
Many worlds interacting. Sorry.
Hey,
yeah,
I have a
MWI.
totally unrelated pick for this episode.
What's that?
Did you guys watch the season finale, the series finale of Mr. Robot?
Nope.
What'd you think?
I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It was a softer landing than I expected, and I wanted to be moved to tears, and I wasn't. They didn't really aim for that, though, you know.
Yeah.
But they did deliver just one more gut punching surprise, and the longer I sat with it, the more I liked it, and the more I liked there's sort of what I believe is a bit of an iconic kind of end scene, and I liked that you know, from the first scene of episode 1, he directly addresses the audience, and as they wrap everything up, I like the fact that I felt like I had a place in that scene as the audience member, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, we talked a lot about it on the last Spoiler in Time for Cord Killers, the penultimate episode of Mr. Robot, and I was hesitant about it because there are a lot of different ways it could have gone, and I really, really dig the way that it resolved everything. It was not my first choice of the stupid stuff I would have loved to see them do. But I think it was very sweet. I was just watching it, and I also didn't cry, but I could feel it right in my chest of just like, how substantial it feels for only 4 seasons.
There are a lot of shows that I've given up on because I've been afraid that they're not going to stick the landing. And if whoever hears these words was like that with Mr. Robot, number one, I'm going to say that I watched it week after week. And so there's a few things that, you forget from season 1 that tie into season 4. And, all things being equal, it probably flows even better if you binge the whole thing. And it definitely sticks the landing. I would say I won't know what it's like to sit down and just start it today and go through all 4 seasons, but I bet it's pretty epic and great. I bet it's a fantastic experience.
We should talk off the stream about a scene in the finale that I did not recognize, and when I was
there was a reference to another thing.
More than that.
Okay,
more than that, man.
Oh,
Very
like
cool.
literally footage from the other thing. Okay.
All
All right.
show.
It's a great show.
Most of it is on Amazon Prime right now.
Nice. Hey, I watched The Witcher.
Oh, what'd you think?
It's on Netflix. I ain't never played these video games. I ain't never read these books. I don't know if I would vouch for it in terms of writing quality, but it is a fire hose of fantasy. Like, it is an unrelenting stream of fantasy. And the thing that I liked about it was it's at least not, if it's gonna be balls out weird fantasy, it's at least not boring. That there were episodes where I'm like, oh, this is the fantasy thing where they, the Deep Chop comes over here and then they find the talisman and there's another talisman and then they, eventually go under a magic waterfall. And it's constantly kind of like shifting and evolving. And yes, it is if you're frustrated by fantasy writing where there's always an incantation and there's always another rule that is older magic than the old magic that you thought you were working toward, it certainly has plenty of that. But I will say that it was smarter than I thought it was going to be. And that is something that I enjoy in a show like that. It's certainly not the tactician or politician dreams of Game of Thrones. It is far more Beastmaster than Game of Thrones.
Go on.
You have my attention, sir.
And it feels like something that's speed running a fantasy book. Like, at a certain point you're like, oh, okay, this is
because it's like a monster of the week sort of thing. It's not all serialized arcs, right? That's what I've heard.
There's a lot of, I almost hesitate to say it, but if it will get people interested, there's a lot of skipping. Like you might think that, and that's part of what I enjoyed about it was just when you kind of think what this character is going to do, there's a lot of time skipping around. And for some holiday binge watching, I thought it was pretty good. And also, man, Henry Cavill, a very likable actor. I think this is a great role for him. He is obviously enough of the heavy to be the big, studly action star, but you like him enough that you're not bored by just watching him hack through somebody else.
Over the holiday, my parents asked that I buy them Disney Plus so that the grandkids could watch.
By which they meant buy yourself Disney Plus and give them the password.
They gave me $100 in cash just to.
That's how you do it. Brilliant.
So I, Disney Plus has got so much stuff on it. It's got that big catalog, all these new originals, shorts and cartoons and stuff. And so my pick for this week is The Simpsons. The only thing I could find on Disney Plus that I wanted to watch.
Oh no!
Simpsons, eh?
I do want to watch The Mandalorian, I guess, but talking about.
Okay, first of all, you didn't even give a try to The World According to Jeff Goldblum.
We as a family did, and it was it was very surface level. It was like the first episode is about sneakers, and it's like, sneakers isn't that what they wear in the basketball
yeah,
court?
keep-
But they're
keep doing-
expensive.
Keep doing your very best Jeff Goldblum impression. And for me, it will be like a sequel to Thor Ragnarok. Just keep going.
No,
My-
no. These sneakers. How much do they? $500. No, wow. It was a lot of that.
My favorite review of Jeff Goldblum explains everything or whatever it's called is that in that pilot episode he's shocked by the concept of shoes.
Yeah.
Like he's just mystified that laces exist, like as if he was just like dropped from Mars, and he's just like, wow, what little strings through the shoes. Oh.
And it was a lot of that, and so I think we'd put it on, and everybody left the room while it was on. Didn't come back.
Little known fact: Earth Girls Are Easy was a documentary about how Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
But hey, man, The Simpsons. It's still they still haven't solved that like widescreen issue where they've cropped them all.
Yeah, because they're cutting out like gag jokes. There was one where the joke was they're touring the Duff Beer Factory, and there's giant vats of Duff Dry, Duff Light, Duff Regular, or whatever, and then
It cuts it out so you don't see that they're all from the same pipe.
yeah.
And that was actually one of the episodes I ended up watching the past few days. I was like, oh yeah, that just doesn't look, that's nothing if you don't see that right. They've said that they're going to fix those. But I think like,
Which,
hey,
by the way, there was no way that was getting fixed before the end of the Mandalorian run, because Disney is definitely going to get at least a day with the Simpsons fans where it's, hey, if you haven't signed up for Disney Plus yet, like, here we go. Let's get those sub numbers up.
and I don't know, it's weird because you can tell it's an HD transfer of at least the old ones of the cells because it looks really sharp. But also there was a scene, I had paused it and I came back to it a little while later, and it was some shot of the family TV, and it was like 4:3. It looked like it was right, and it made me think, oh, did it just switch over? But it was just that one shot. It was for some reason just that one shot. So whenever they did, and might have been FX that did this because FX had The Simpsons before Disney Plus. There's some weird conversion thing that happened.
Here's what I suspect is at first just get it on there. Let us say the letters HD with it. And I think Justin's right. Then when there's a gap in the schedule, let's make a thing of doing it. And you can
because FX had this exact same issue when it was on FX Plus or the FX app. They were all in this widescreen conversion, and then they eventually switched over to 4:3.
Once a human is able to touch every bit of this, you can actually get something really delightful out of it. I remember the same thing happened with The Wire. Was it David Simon? So who did the Wire?
Yeah.
David Simon was writing about how some scenes it made sense to punch in, other scenes it made sense to just let it be wider. And one of the last scenes of season 2, where you see all of the dock workers. Originally, it was framed 4:3. It looked like there was a bazillion of them because it was all cut off. But he realized it was a more poignant message when you expanded it to 16:9, because you saw that while they were gathered very closely, they weren't that many. And so they were a crowd, but they were a lonely crowd. And so, once you have a person doing things on purpose, I think everything gets all smoothed out.
Yeah, we're still in a very weird time of taking SD to HD conversions. I mean, there was a thing a few years ago about Malcolm in the Middle going HD and widescreen on Netflix, but it was not cut for 4:3, so you could see things like stand-ins of the kids in the additional side.
Oh, that's great.
Stuff like that. But hey, you know what? The Simpsons still really holds up. A lot of physical comedy style comedy in an animated show still really holds up.
Yeah. My favorite of one of those when they re-released was the original Star Trek the Motion Picture, where they did the extended edition, and there's sequences where like when Spock comes out of the Star Enterprise, they do this wide, and it's an unfinished matte shot. You just literally see part of the hole and you see the rest of like the sound studio, but because it looked techie or spacey or something, because it was like girders and stuff, they left it in. But you're like, man, like anybody watch this? First, I'm not a pick. I'm going to show you. I got the best Christmas present possible. I don't want to brag. I don't want to make anybody jealous. But my girlfriend gave me this.
Forgive my laughter.
Oh my gosh, I have a condition. More on
my
back.
God, that's funny.
That's
So
so
you got the Joker
great.
card.
Yes, I got the Joker card.
That's
For and so damn straight I'm gonna keep this and use this. Probably I refrained from using this in the line at the airport, for the TSA. And hand them the card. That would have kept me from getting on there. Oh yes, and I got this. She got me this.
Coffee mug.
It's the Elon Musk.
The tweet. I am considering
yeah,
taking.
the infamous. Yeah, I'm considering taking Tesla private at 420, funding secured. Which, by the way, in the news because Tesla hit 420 last week.
Yep. It hit a high this year of 435. So it's currently below 420. So, but anyhow, that was pretty funny. But my pick is this, man. There have been some shows have come out that haven't got as much attention as other stuff. I think I mentioned before Castle Rock season 2. I really enjoy Castle Rock. If you like anthology, you like horror, love dark stuff, highly recommend Castle Rock. But that's not what I'm here to pick. I'm halfway through this so far, and this has been delightful. Anybody else here watch The Terror season 1?
No.
So The Terror is the fictionalized account of the ships, the HMS Terror and the Airbus, which were two ships that were sent off by the British government to try to find a Northwest Passage in the 1800s. They were the most technologically advanced ships of their day. They had, like diving suits to fix things like propellers. They were part steam powered, part sail powered. They were the most well equipped. It was like kind of like the NASA of its day. They went up in the North Passage and winter came, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen with the water and the ice, but they got iced in. So all of a sudden, what was the wide open ocean became solid ice, and these ships were stuck for over 2 years. And we did not know what happened to them until quite recently. So it was one of the big mysteries of what happened to the ships. Literally like 2 years ago or something, I think we found the wreckage or some remnants of that. But they take that account of these two ships, these two, the pride of the Navy of the day, and tell a story about this, a horror story involving, elements of, I guess you would say Inuit legend stuff, not like that, whatever. Really, really enjoying it. Really enjoying it. So The Terror on Hulu.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. I guess that's it. I guess.
Happy 2020.
Yeah,
Yeah.
buy tens.
Yeah.
Eat my farts, loser.
Beginning of a
That's
new
right.
decade. Come at me if you think that it's not the end of the decade.
Yeah. I just had a dark thought. I'm like, God, man, think about doing this for 10 years from now. And I'm like, I hope we're all here.
Oh.
Jeez. All right. You know what? I'm going to say it. It's been weird.
All right. That's weird things, everybody. Ugh. Well, that's really, yeah.
That one got weird.
Got a little weird on the end there.
Are we gonna talk about this movie?
Should
Yeah,
we
yeah,
Star
that's
Wars for
all we're gonna do, man. This is gonna be a 30-minute special. We're all gonna
talk about it.
we're gonna decompress, man. You saw that thing, right? Okay. All right.
I think I got Bryce's out of the theater reaction.
Yes, you did. Oh my gosh, I have questions for
Ken,
stuff.
I am the oldest. I am technically the first one to die.
Well, it's not Logan's Run. Oh,
Given my lifestyle and dietary habits, it's amazing it hasn't happened already.
dashboard. Yeah. So if anybody needs to take a break now, it'd be good.
All right.
So when'd you get back, Bryce?
Saturday evening, late on Saturday, later than I would have liked, and then we had a shoot on Sunday.
Did you get delayed or?
Yeah, I already had a long layover, which was like a 3-hour layover, and then my second plane had like an hour plus delay.
Where'd you lay over?
Baltimore.
Baltimore.
The way back.
Man, I think I've only flown in and out of Baltimore once. I do remember that they had a very nice off-site rental car facility.
Yeah. Their terminal is nice. They have a pretty big food court thing, and it's not the worst place to be stuck for 4 hours, but it'd been better if it was not that long. It's always so weird, the routing on that stuff, because my flight out, I went through Orlando, so it was like 2 relatively short flights. But coming home from Virginia, it was up to Baltimore and then into Texas, and it was
Always sucks. Always sucks when you're going, west to go east or east to go west. It's that's always tough too, especially when you're mostly doing eastern seaboarding. You would almost rather. No. I mean, really, your best layover is south, somewhere where there's not snow.
Yeah.
You just want to get out of snow,
out of the
and get to
weather. Absolutely.
out snow. Yeah, I had a little bit of a layover coming out of Austin in Phoenix, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
it was Phoenix.
I'm surprised you didn't have a direct flight between Austin and San Fran.
Well, because we booked that one super late.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, because we were just looking to knock out those bank episodes, and so that that was just catch as catch can coming back into Oakland. But yeah, that was like an hour, 2 hours, and I wound up watching the debate the entire time.
Yeah, that's not too bad for a layover. This one was long enough. It was long enough where I ate right when I got off the plane and thought, not gonna be able
Yeah,
to get off.
They actually had an Amex. They're building an Amex lounge in Phoenix, right?
Okay.
But they don't have one. So they have a makeshift one that actually had somebody like being a waiter and like bringing you stuff. But he was only one dude, and there were a lot of people. So it was just set up a thing.
You know what I saw
Let me
at the Baltimore airport that was weird? What is it called? Air Sherpa or something, where it's like a DoorDash thing, but for the airport. So you could say, I'm at this gate, bring me an Auntie Anne's pretzel or something.
I've seen some of those. Man,
That
I'll
was
tell
a
you
weird
what.
one.
If there were a way that you could more easily do that, and it would get you stuff off the premises, which I think is the reason why it would never happen, because these, brands pay a lot of money to have the exclusive access to these customers. That could be a thing. Because I'll tell you what, there are situations where I would pay money if somebody were just waiting with lunch as soon as I walked off a plane.
Yeah.
Like, I would grab a Wendy's and just walk to my gate and eat it on the way there. It'd be fun.
Justin, do you need to go take a break?
Yeah, let me.
I'm just gonna say, at the risk of, like, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
My clothes I buy from Amazon if it's not from the SpaceX store. Like, literally, I bought myself, my latest pair of sneakers is like a $30 pair of sneakers, which is like a knockoff of like a bigger version. I don't spend money on stuff that unless I go, I'll spend money on gadget and stuff. That being said, like, when I travel now, it has to be like business class or better, because I hate traveling.
Really?
I'm saying, like, I'm super cheap about a lot of stuff. But that's the one thing where I'm like, I want convenience and comfort.
Yeah.
And you just get used to the idea of like, I can just board the plane now whenever I want. Like, I can annoy the flight attendant as much as I want for whatever I want, And that's sort of the benefit there. So
I did kind of feel that on the way back home. We had that super long delay, and it was long enough where I was like, when the plane gets here, I just want to be in my seat and just be in. But it was like, I didn't realize that the because it's on Southwest, the Southwest priority boarding, this stuff around the A1 through A15. The price is dependent on where you're going. I thought it was always $30.
No, to be honest, I think it's not even where you're going. It's how full the flight is and what they can get for it or whatever. You're talking about the last minute upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were like, because it's 30, 40, or 50. My understanding is based on your itinerary. And when I went to the desk, they were like, "Oh yeah, no, it's $40 for Austin, and it doesn't include a free drink." And I was like, "Whatever." But that was the
Yeah.
sort of thing where I kind of would have liked a nicer option on Southwest, just because I was already having a day. Though both of the drinks that I had on the airplanes, I did not have to pay for.
Yeah.
Spin Dash 12. Yeah, I guess since Andrew and Justin haven't finished Mr. Robot, it'll all be Star Wars because
It'll be next week on Spoiler in Time, so
Yeah.
stay tuned for that. CordKillers.com.
hey man, since we're just gonna talk about Star Wars, Little Women was great.
Oh, was it good?
It was just great. I liked it a lot.
We went and saw Uncut Gems over the holiday. That movie rocks.
Yeah?
That movie is
cool.
really, really good.
I mean, that makes sense because you're always singing the praises of Adam Sandler
and
movies.
Kevin Garnett, yeah. But he's wonderful in it. Just the whole time. I mean, the start of it, this is not a spoiler. I'm not talking about a spoiler plot or anything. But the first 15 or 20 minutes, you know, when you're in a big crowd, you're in a small room, but there's a lot of people in it, and everyone's having a conversation, and it's just bum, 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 bum. That's like the first 20 minutes of this movie, where it's just constant, and it's so good. Oh, God, it's
That's interesting because that's actually something they do really, really well in Little Women. And I mean this is the talking over each other, like you believe that this is a happy household with a bunch of people who are excited and the interactions all feel 100% genuine.
yeah.
You know, that's the having people talk over sort of thing. That style is great, and I think it was I'm trying to remember
Altman?
who.
Altman?
Yeah, I think it was Altman's probably one of the first ones to do that. You go back and look at something like Nashville and stuff like that, but really good. Like one of the things I'll tell when you watch a movie and you go, "Man, this is great," is like Spielberg movies are great because his characters do that. You watch
Yeah.
Jaws, there's conversations going on in there.
Beginning
You know,
of E.T.
Yeah, and then you watch a movie that you go is a bad version of something like that, and you go, kid number one, what about that? Blah blah blah. Person number two, da 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 da. And you realize that's the difference between a great director and somebody who does not understand. Is a great director knows like, okay, this is what reality is. I'll bring the camera here to capture the thing I need to do, but I'm going to make this feel real. And you watch other movies that just don't feel real, and it's hard to put your finger on it until you step back and you look at, like you said, there is like, oh yeah, everybody's sort of talking and this thing's going on, but then we find the story and we find the realism.
Yeah.
Which,
I
love that.
Are you guys going to see Little Women?
Probably not.
Are they actually really Little Women?
No. There's a
TLC show.
There's a great moment where
Right.
they depart from the book, and then they shine a spotlight on it because in the book at some point,
Did they play trap music, or is that just Dickinson?
at some point, everybody's favorite character, Josephine, Jo, she begins to write her stories, and they become popular, right? So kind of getting meta on that, but the actual story ends with Jo not wanting to get married, not wanting to find a significant other, and just being a happy spinster. And they shine a spotlight on that by having a scene where she's talking to the publisher, and the publisher and they're intercutting kind of future time with this time, where she's chasing down this character who she kind of liked or whatever, and is very clearly setting up like a chance at romance and all this, but it keeps cutting back to him saying like, wait, so the one character, the one that just doesn't get married and is a spinster, and she's like, yeah, and he's like, well, she either needs to die or get married. That's the rules. And and she's like, well, no, but she very clearly has said she never wants to get married. You're like, look, do you want this published? Do you want people to see this or not? And then, like, very clearly indicating, we're going to falsely inject the possibility of a romance. We are aware that we are intentionally diverging from it. This is me, the publisher who is a stand-in for the director of this movie, saying that to you right now. Get over it.
That's funny.
Wow. All right, are we all ready to talk about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
Okay, then, Andrew, I'm going to count you in. How about that? Coming in 3, 2,
Hello and welcome to After Things. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood,
Hello, beautiful people.
Mr. Bryce Castillo.
Wow, wow, wow. Hi. That's what Star Wars is, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. It's Michael Winslow's greatest movie.
And Justin Robert Young.
Yo.
So, gentlemen, any major events that affected the lives of these man children here?
Any end to a 40-year journey that happened for any of us?
Was it?
Not really.
Oh,
I'm gonna
no.
start-
Look,
start
they
there.
did it. They tied it all together. Those masterful bastards. They
Why
somehow,
was it?
they,
Where was anybody asking for this to wrap up everything
it was,
from every movie?
it was all, I was the kindest I can be. And there's a lot of good reasons to fuss, and I'm sure we're about to fuss, but that it's a difficult. If they had just ended the current trilogy, I think we would have had a fine, completed puzzle. But instead, somebody walked onto a desk, poured out 70% of a jigsaw puzzle, 3 Uno cards, a broken Rubik's Cube, and said, act like all of this is one puzzle, and with a straight face be able to tell me that you solved it. We'll see in a bit.
I'm going to do a disclaimer first. Number one, folks, spoilers. I can't imagine what spoiler would possibly ruin your enjoyment of Rise of Skywalker, but anyway, we'll say spoilers. If you like the movie, good.
Great.
Yes. I want people. We want people to enjoy this. We want people to like the movie. If you like this, we're not going to go, oh, how dare you? We're going to dissect it in our own way and sort of our own in our own thing. So do not feel offended or whatever if our take on this, and I don't know what everybody else's take is different. And I really, if you enjoy the movie, there are movies that I love that other people I could point out why they're kind of garbage. And I love them for reasons besides that. And if you love this movie, that's good. I think that's good. And I've tried rewatching some movies to get myself to that point until I get Stockholm Syndrome with stuff. I've tried that with Rise, and other movies I go back and watch again, and I realize I'm not on team Last Jedi anymore either. I mean, I could go into
But
everything that does good, this does horribly. Everything this does good, that did horribly. I mean, but anyhow, if you enjoy this, if you enjoy Rise of Skywalker, please, we're not questioning anybody's taste or judgment. God forbid, because my own would be the first one that should be suspect.
Let me just say this. When I was a kid, my favorite Star Wars movie was Return of the Jedi. Because it was the one that was released closest to it. And then I got to be a teenager, and some of my favorite movies, I got into the independent boom of the 90s, and I loved Clerks, and I had to watch characters in this new movie that I love so much that I felt spoke to me and my generation. Trash Return of the Jedi. Needling on Star Wars is older than the internet and will continue to be a bedrock of it. I am rejecting this idea that we are politically aligned by the Star Wars movies that we like, and whether or not they are personality defining elements to us. If that's where you are, God bless. But I'm just here to talk about the Star Wars movie. Criticizing them and nitpicking them is just a part of my culture, much like The Mandalorian, where weapons are my religion. Criticizing Star Wars is my religion. Please, I cede the floor to Brian.
But before we dive in, though, you mentioned Stockholm Syndrome, which, just real quick aside, I made the kids watch Die Hard, and I watched Die Hard again. It's a bit of a ritual. How did I go this many times and not notice that they miscall Stockholm Syndrome? They don't call it Stockholm Syndrome. They call it Helsinki Syndrome, which is not a thing. And they say, oh, maybe this is a different syndrome, but then they go on to exactly describe Stockholm Syndrome. And in fact, if you do a search for Helsinki Syndrome, it will forward you to Stockholm Syndrome and talk about how, for whatever reason, they just didn't want to call Stockholm Syndrome on Die Hard, and they called it Helsinki Syndrome. I had no idea. Am I the last one to the dance on this, or had you guys noticed this?
I never knew that.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, let's tear apart this movie.
I have a question because I'm the newest person to Star Wars. I had not seen any of the original trilogies, and I walked out of the Rise of Skywalker. I thought Force Awakens was okay. I really liked The Last Jedi, and I think I even asked you this, Justin, when I got out of the movie. Are there any good Star Wars movies? Are Star Wars movies good?
All right, Bryce, get out.
No,
Get off.
Look.
I mean, by the numbers. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Your Honor, if I can have your attention, my client, I believe what he meant to say is, look at the numbers as a percentage. A thumbs up, thumbs down. I do believe good Star Wars movies are in the minority of the canonical 9.
That's just what I'm getting at, because I know that the original trilogy is beloved. I know that the prequel trilogy is kind of panned, and I know this current sequel trilogy is a mixed bag. But I kind of mean this. Is the original trilogy something prestigious, or is it?
There are 2.5 great Star Wars movies.
Okay.
Maybe 2 3/4.
Oh.
Star Wars, Empire, and I like Jedi. Jedi gets ripped on, but Jedi gave us wonderful things like the big fat Jabba the Hutt alien gangster. It gave us speeder bikes. It gave us so many cool moments. You know, that like Jedi is like, I will agree that there are some elements that sort of are disappointing in Jedi to a degree from an older eyes, but
yeah, the only thing
other
I
than
can
that-
ding on, even the idea of the Ewoks is a good idea. It's just that the Ewoks are a little bit cuddlier than they ought to be. And, a second Death Star is a little bit retready. Those are really the only two things you can ding on. The redemption arc of Vader I thought was great.
I mean, people rip the brother sister thing that was that Lucas needed another big reveal after the Luke Skywalker father thing was such a gigantic element of Empire. But look, criticize Jedi, that's fine. I'm here for it. I just want to take this moment to say about Rise of Skywalker. What?
I'm so with you. Okay,
Like,
and by the way,
this is like-
that
was-
sentiment begins with the first 3 words of the crawl. The dead speak. When you knew there was trouble the moment you walked into that theater.
When did Palpatine? I watched the sequel trilogy. Where the hell was he?
I've had a podcast for many months already.
No, stop it. This is the first thing.
And another thing about Alderaan, let me tell you.
The first thing that Brian told me was after he saw the movie was that the opening words of the trilogy or of the Rise of Skywalker crawl should be Bill O'Reilly has a podcast.
You thought I was
never been able to say-
#canceled, but here I am, brought to you by Purple Mattresses.
And then imagine now it's Tucker Carlson getting the Wayfinder and cutting his way to Bill O'Reilly's Swamp Island. The movie was for me, and I did not have high expectations for it. I thought it was just going to be perfunctory. It subverted my expectations. It was not perfunctory. It was very loud and very weird, but it was just a large sequence of me just saying like, wait, what?
Yeah, so my frustration, and again, a lot of my frustration comes from storytelling. Which direction a director goes in, that doesn't bother me as long as it makes sense and it's smart. And I enjoyed kind of Last Jedi mostly the first time through because I'm like, oh cool, it's not following the path of what we expect is going to happen. But then I watch it again like, no, he just did opposite guy on every single thing to the point that the characters did. If you go back and watch Last Jedi, like they do stupid stuff. Like Rise of Skywalker should have started with like Finn and Rose being tried for effing crimes against the Resistance because like they literally told the whole plans to, Empire and Force, First Order age. I mean, you just start analyzing, you're like, oh my God, everybody just acted stupid in that. Here, my frustration is, I want to bring out the Palpatine. It's great. As people pointed out, it's actually Dark Empire, the comic book, brought back Palpatine, which was a great storyline. I love Dark Empire, right? Fine. Just start that from movie number 1 with Force Awakens. Have that be the direction you're going. Don't try to gaslight us in this movie into telling us literally in the worst villain monologue explaining everything ever. Like, you see what I did was, here's a clone tank with Snoke. You didn't believe me? Here he is, because I keep them laying around. It's just
He's
bad.
got build a Snokes. Build a Snokes. He's like just in case I needed to build another.
I mean, to be honest, look, it's easy for us to armchair quarterback, and we don't know what kind of influences people were working under or what directives or initiatives or whatever. But it's like, if what you want is a visual of Palpatine back from the grave, then just tell me, hey, I am all of Sith. I take whatever face I want. My faces are Legion. I'm gonna wear this one right now. It happens to look like Palpatine. But to have it, I don't know. But to have it actually be Palpatine,
but also, like, if you're gonna bring him back, they have to bring him back physically, and he has to be Palpatine, because we find out that the heroine of our entire trilogy is indeed the granddaughter of Sheev Palpatine. Sheev, confirmed sex haver Palpatine.
Yeah, I listen, like I kept turning to my girlfriend throughout the movie. I'm like, wait, the what? And my Star Destroyers that I buried. I'm like, wait, what? Who built these? I remember, like, it took everything to build, a Death Star, and now you've got all this, and then we're watching the end with
also there are crews on these Death Stars of what appeared to be humans that they hand-wavingly mentioned. By the way, we love kidnapping babies because we need somebody to crew our stuff. In which case, I'm just pitying these poor beings. They're like I don't want to hate. Don't blow them up. These are children who were kidnapped.
And then I'm like, when they're the final battle, there's a whole arena filled with people in hoods, and I'm like, this is like Harry Potter. They just like, who are these people?
Were they waiting there the whole time?
Our whole movie was about trying to find the secret planet, and like there's an arena full of people here, and all the First Order people showed up. Like, who are they? I'm like, they're dying. I'm like, who are these people that are getting killed by the collapse? I'm like, oh, they're Sith loyalists.
And we haven't even gotten this is all background storytelling stuff. We haven't even gotten to the fact that even just when it comes to direction, what you want are anchors and things to care about. And this movie didn't have the testicles to give us one damn thing. Like we blew up Chewie. I'm like, oh wow, maybe this movie does have some balls.
Right?
Psych. No, we don't. Like
it was just somehow a different ship.
Wait,
We saw it. They saw it.
Are you going to kill C-3PO? Well, we might not kill him, but what if he forgot his friends? Wouldn't that be kind of a bummer?
That'd be a
Psych.
sacrifice.
How about we just restore that a few seconds later?
Here's an example of what my frustration is like. Right now in the chat, people are going, "Oh no, they're ghosts. They're ghosts." No, we've been told. If you read the interview, we were told that they are Sith loyalists. Yeah, you wouldn't know that from the movie.
No, Luke is a ghost, is my understanding.
What's that?
Luke is a ghost, and he just gives her all sorts of ghost gifts. Now we're just giving ghost gifts.
We you have to have a writer go, oh no, they're Sith loyalists. They're actually like what? No, those are real people. Oh yeah, that's the explanation that's been given outside of by the writer.
Yes, it turns out many people listen to my podcast. I'm second only to Joe Rogan. My loyalists are going to join me in my secret clubhouse.
Can't even agree that the 50,000 people watching were real people are ghosts. I mean,
Audible.com brings you the finest in audio entertainment while you're washing the dishes.
Not to mention, what's the plan?
Well, okay, as you know, caller on line 2, as you know, money is made when you blow up planets. That's how economies work. The more planets you blow up, the more evil credits you get. Therefore, I have made a bazillion blowy up planets things.
I can explain to you the plan very easily because it's a J.J. Abrams movie.
Yeah.
There is a super weapon And in order to stop the super weapon, you have to get the what's it, which leads you to the who's it, and then you get the super weapon, which would be all the Star Trek movies and would be all of his Star Wars movies.
But also,
I'm glad one
what
color
is-
gets it.
what is Palpatine's? Because Palpatine creates Snoke so he can seduce Ben Solo to the dark side, but he doesn't really want Ben Solo to be his apprentice. He really wants him to try and kill Rey, but not kill Rey, but then bring Rey. But
Okay.
then he wants Rey to kill him, but then doesn't want.
But then he doesn't want that because then they both could kill him, and if they both do that, then the Constitution says that it's got to go to the Senate.
But then he realizes that he is a Dementor and he can just take their life force with his Harry Potter powers, and then I genuinely I don't know what his
First of
Man.
all, to seduce Ben Solo, all you need is like a Morrissey mixtape and $100 Hot Topic gift card. Done. Okay.
Also, speaking of seducing Ben, what is it that Leia does? Like, I mean, when they have the big fight, she just goes, "I die now," and he's like, "I'm good now." Like,
Yeah, hey
what
Bryce,
is-
I'm
what
sorry
is
to be the
that?
one. Bryce, I'm sorry to be the one to
Bryce.
break this to you. The actor died in
No,
production,
I know that.
and they kind of had to adjust to that reality.
But he should have been like, "Oh, my mom. Now I'm a good." It should have been something. It should have been something instead of nothing.
The cut version was, well, I walked in on my mom and my uncle making out.
Yeah, boy. I mean, I understand that they were dealt a really rough hand with Carrie Fisher dying, and this was from the very beginning. If there's one thing that we know for sure Disney had planned and that did survive the creative changing of the guard, is that Han was the first movie, Luke was the second movie, Leia was the third movie, and then Leia died before the production of the third movie. So, okay, if that's what seems to be the only thread that made it through all three films, I get it. You built up to this idea. She has to be a part of it. And the closest you could get is having Carrie Fisher standing in that same way she's standing and like kind of moving her around like a Carrie Fisher chess piece from one set to another, where she's standing the exact same way and talking.
Oh, jeez, that was awful.
It was,
That was just always this pose, the hands crossed like this. It was so. I would have preferred that we started with like, hey, General Leia died in between 2 and 3.
You had to go back to her own
between 8 and
planet.
9. What's that?
yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. Like,
Yeah.
because also, hey, look, by the way, it's not like you didn't do it. You already made another Hux. You made another Hux for no reason. These are all things that the Hux could have done, but no, you had to make Hux the spy so he could get shot 5 seconds later. But they have one character that just obviously is a stand-in for another character. You already have Carrie Fisher's daughter in the movie. She's there. Just
Well,
whatever.
part of the Hux thing was because Last Jedi made Hux. It made the First Order a Benny Hill sketch, and Hux was no threat. One of the most important leaders of the First Order became a complete joke, and it lost its threat. So I get the idea that it's like Johnson's trying to course correct for what Abrams did in Force Awakens,
yeah.
and then Abrams trying to course correct for what Johnson did, and you have 3 stories that go in completely different directions. There is no unified theme through them all. At least with the original trilogy, it was, you knew it would be over when the Emperor was dead. You know,
Yeah.
we know the beginning, bad guys in charge of the Empire. We got to get him. We don't even see him in Star Wars. More aware of him in Empire, and then, Jedi. Here, it's like, got to stop the First Order. Dot.
Did you guys notice that? Not that we're going to spoilery talk about The Mandalorian, but did you notice that this is the one deviation on the schedule that The Mandalorian did? It's always been released on Fridays, except for the
They
day
doubled
before
it.
this movie.
Release week.
Do you think that's because on The Mandalorian they showed a use of the Force that we hadn't seen before, and then saw used a lot in this movie?
What was that?
I
That Force
understood it,
healing, basically.
Oh, okay.
Like that.
I
That was a plot point in The Mandalorian.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, but that we knew that was coming before because the Baby Yoda regional. I think it was not because of that at all. I think it was money wise. Was they literally wanted the conversation to be, about Rise of Skywalker, is not to have an overlapping people on Friday staying home to watch Mandalorian.
Yeah, no, I think it was just them adjusting the schedule last minute to make sure that.
Brian, I wish they cared as much as about story as that. I wish they cared about something like that.
Oh my God,
Brian's version of Lucasfilm. Tell me more, because
I mean, to be honest, the biggest thing about Rise of Skywalker is that it beat me to the point where I didn't care. I was just like by halfway through, I'm like, I don't even know what's happening. I don't know who these people are. They don't really feel like even the threads of the characters that I liked from the first couple movies. Poe and Finn. It seems like the movie spends more time trying to convince us that they're not gonna bang each other than really giving them anything to do.
But
in terms
even
of
then,
growth
it definitely
plot.
ends almost too deliberately on a three-way hug between Rey and Finn and Poe. Like, we all love each other
why
the
did she
right
kiss Ben?
amount.
Why did
But
she kiss
they
Ben?
went out of their way in this one with the no homo bro girlfriends or girls, like
Yeah.
they get split off to hang out with other women, just so you know. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. No. Yeah. Remember when they had to dress Felicity like the Rocketeer to distract from the gay heat being generated by the two male leads?
it's like that made me even more like maybe there really is a thing because they're trying really hard to my biggest complaint about this trilogy is this, and I've said this before, I say it again, is Harry Potter is about three friends, three people who knew each other and spent time together and explored a magical world. The original Star Wars trilogy, three people with their friends come together in Star Wars, and we watch their journey throughout. Like, oh, they're not always together in Empire. Right. They get separated, but they try to find their way back to each other to help them out. Jedi begins with them trying to save Han. It's so tight. Star Trek, Kirk, Spock, okay, McCoy, that core group and everybody else, those are those stories are about. It's three people exploring this amazing world. The best fantasy, the best sci-fi is almost always about that. The stuff that stays with us the longest. Lord of the Rings, same things. And I pointed this out because I did this on Twitter and I said this before. We only get Rey. This is the first movie where we've had Rey, Poe, and Finn together. They have never shared scenes together. The first time that Rey met Poe was at the end of Last Jedi in a brief scene. A very brief, hey, you're so-and-so. Okay, nice to meet you. That Colin Trevorrow, back when he was going to do this episode 9, had to ask to be put in there because he's like, man, I got to make a movie about three people, these three core characters who've never met each other. And so when people say Force Awakens is a copy of Star Wars, I'm like, no, like from a character point of view, it's absolutely not. It loses the most important element, which was these three people coming together over time. Now, we get three characters, three iconic characters, but they don't have to know each other.
And on an individual level, none of the characters are allowed to do anything without their parents getting involved and saving the day. It seems like.
Yeah. So, Jedi, to me, the biggest storytelling and upending your sense of where things are going aside, to me, the biggest sin of The Last Jedi was how small everything felt. You want to feel like everything's scaling up. Star Wars was Star Wars. Force Awakens was roughly felt about the size of Star Wars, whereas Empire, the second movie, it felt much bigger. You're like, oh my God, this is a very big force or whatever. Whereas The Last Jedi did the reverse thing. We're looking at, 5 rebel ships and 2 Empire guys chasing them down. It felt small. And then it's like they overcompensated and went straight into nonsensical prequels territory where it's like, all the planets are in danger. All of the ships are there. And nobody's going to fight them until Lando goes galaxy to galaxy offering his signature cackle, and and then they all will understand that they have to fight with their pitchforks.
We got 16 hours to find this thing. It's about to destroy the galaxy. You guys go run off. We're going to hang out here on the Resistance base. And
Also, not a
Plan
great
about-
opening. If you want my respect to be, what was it, light speed skipping? Yeah, you can't jump to light speed in a gravity well. Everybody knows that. Even that was even implied in the movies. You didn't even have to read any of the books for that. That's not a real
I
thing.
mean, that's also, there's just a lot of kind of, I don't even want to get into the fast and loose
Well,
of
it was-
like
that
where
was
the
fun in
powers
Guardians of the
are.
Galaxy when they did that.
What's that?
The Guardians of the Galaxy did the jumping thing, from the spot to spot where the Watchers are there and all that. Remember? They had a
Yeah,
scene
but
with-
they hadn't established. They weren't breaking an entire universe with established rules or whatever. Or
Why? I
but
mean,
that was more rule breaking than the power of friendship
Okay.
saving the day
hold on.
by having two lightsabers. and two is
Gambling
more
man,
than
gambling man in the chat asking the real questions. I totally noticed that. What was that weird ass Lando scene? Was he hitting on that girl? Like, is he about to bang that chick, that weird stormtrooper, Finn's friend? Remember, Finn
Lady
found a
Finn.
friend.
Yeah, Lady Finn with the horse. So Lady Finn with the horse, who has the exact same backstory as Finn, because, I mean, God, if it weren't for the fact that I really want politics and Star Wars to be separated, there's, I'm sure, a very long thing about why the only black characters have to have the exact same black story. But that also.
You're right, because that goes all the way back to the Kenner Toys commercials. You notice, like, everybody's playing with their toys, and the one kid who's playing with Lando, you got to have the black kid play with the Lando toy.
Have black and play Lando. So Lando shows up, and he's Lando, and he's like, "Aha! I'm Burning Mad now." And then he goes, "Ha ha! Now I'm on the ship. Look at me! Ha ha!" And then he sits down when literally the only character thing that we really know about Lando is that, like, he was hitting on Leia back in Empire, and he's kind of a playboy, and he sits down with this younger chick and is like, it's like, "Oh, so what's your backstory? Like, so what's your sign, little miss?"
And by
Like,
backstory, I mean, show me your backside.
I don't want to pick on anybody rude, but man, Donald Glover really let himself go.
He figured out an accent though. He picked on one accent for this movie. I like.
My problem with Last Jedi was everybody. I mean, Force Awakens. I want to get into that. Last Jedi was everybody did dumb things. You look at what they did, and it was all sort of dumb. It's like Holdo's put in charge. They don't tell Finn, here. I'm not going to tell you what Poe. I'm not going to tell our ace pilot who saved our ass many times what the plan is, because as we know from Star Wars, authority's most important thing of all. If we learned anything from Rogue One and Rebellions and Resistances, that authority is the most important thing. And then that was frustrating. I thought, at least in this movie, characters were smarter as they tried to navigate this very crazy, insane world where nothing made any sense. But we do have that problem of like, oh, the Holdo maneuver. Like, nobody ever, like, from Last Jedi, like, nobody ever thought about doing that before. Like, nobody ever thought, like, what if we ram one ship into another at this? And then here we get into everything changes again. Like, it's just
yeah.
the arbitrary rule.
As Bryce points out, much of the final say in this movie have come from interviews with the creators after the movie had been released. But
The writer of Batman versus Superman.
yeah, apparently that was a scene to set up and might have been fleshed out further, that Lando might have been her father.
Yeah.
The way that it was played, however, and considering that there is like this little wink, wink, nod of like Lando saying like, "Oh, so Princess Leia's single again, huh?" Like that. So we've already reestablished in this movie that he's like here to fuck. That like to have that happen again. I don't know what else the read is supposed to be in that moment.
In defense of Lando, I think that there's a 50-50 odd that if any random child he runs into in the universe could be his own.
I mean, sure. And I think that there's a way that you can do that. I don't.
But it's also sort of the trope that all black people know each other.
Yeah. The-
You know, that's a little like it's not a very big universe after all. Oh,
If I weren't steadfastly and religiously trying to separate politics from Star Wars in our social media climate, I would be very willing to indulge that line of conversation because
Yeah,
I think that it's something that can be said.
All right.
Also, wasn't it? I don't remember The Force Awakens very much. Isn't the whole thing about Finn being like an ex-stormtrooper and kind of breaking out of that system? Wasn't that kind of meant to be like, oh, this is like a 1 in a million thing. This never happens. And then they go to a planet, and everyone on that planet has that same backstory.
yeah, the Smurf village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm misremembering that, but it did seem weird to be like, oh, so Finn just met a whole bunch of people who tell him he's not even special.
That's a legit point. Although and you have not dived into Mandalorian, but Mandalorian takes place shortly after I think 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So there's a lot of people making hard decisions like, do I continue to throw my lot in with the increasingly decaying remains of the Empire, or do I run off and do other stuff?
Okay.
So that didn't really beef me. What did drive me a little crazy is when it decided to go on full on Tomb Raider with an ancient dagger that exactly predicted how the remains of a Death Star were going to land. And happened to have ancient runes on it that exactly lined up.
I went up and I had to use the restroom, and I came back and I'm like, wait, what? We're trying to find a thing to find another thing, and it was just like, yeah, I'm like, wait, who put this thing? Like, it's literally like they just pulled scenes out and just inserted stuff to say, and that was my friend. We got to get to find the thing here to get to the thing there. And then once we have the thing, then we got to, guys, it's like a murder mystery. We got to find our way to the Act 3. We know what happens in Act 3.
Well, and that's, I think, the problem ultimately with having everything so disconnected from the First Order, which if there is one thread that no matter how abused the characters might have been, at least through both the movies, the previous movies, the First Order is your threat, right? Like, and I think that there's certainly legitimate complaints about Last Jedi to say that it was rendered not a threat enough and had to be beefed up. I think you could probably do that in the jump of time between whenever Last Jedi takes place and whenever Rise of Skywalker takes place, but they instead decide to include the Emperor and his swamp thing ships that he's been hiding in his swamp next to his lightning cube.
Just give me 1 second to wrap my mind around this. At least everybody in the First Order at least signed up and at some point decided that they wanted to be evil too. That entire
Well, the First Order
fleet-
does say that they kidnapped people also.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And all of but everybody in every one of those ships on Mystery Planet podcast were babies that were kidnapped who were totally green and had never seen combat before.
Hold on. Wait. No, but that's the Finn backstory too, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
because Finn was taken as a kid.
Like
No, no,
all of a sudden,
Who's kidnapping babies and are there simultaneous baby kidnappings?
No, guys. Let me clarify this for you, okay? Because you're just too dumb to understand the brilliance of this, all right?
Yeah.
The First Order, those people on the ships were First Order because Palpatine had these ships, but he didn't have crews. The First Order people show up, and that's who's there because that's when the First Order becomes the final order. That's who was. Those were it's one group of baby nappers, which is the First Order, and then he's like, we've arranged for the ships because he's been controlling the First Order the whole time.
Yeah.
Reasons. And then that's who's on those ships. But we made such a mystery. Where is this secret planet that tens of thousands of First Order people are traveling to get on the ships, and hundreds of thousands of Sith loyalists are there? Not to mention all the construction workers and the Corellians and everything.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
it takes a lot to hide the largest fleet in the world, in the universe, that also have Star Destroyers on them. Isn't that weird?
No,
they're
Dark Force
all-
powers, Bryce. Dark Force powers. Dark Force.
Okay,
powers,
but why is C-3PO still alive? And why did we introduce yet another droid voiced by J.J. Abrams that just speaks English words randomly.
Well, that's the emotion droid. So you know what emotion you're supposed to be feeling at any given time. Sad.
And then
Sad,
the
sad.
little,
Sad,
the
sad.
most annoying character ever, which was the little droid fixer guy who, for some
Babu
reason, was like
Frick.
what's that?
Babu Frick.
Yeah, hey, we've got a Brazilian soccer fan in here. Great. It just, I'm like, and then he shows up again. He's like shows up with Felicity. I'm like, why am I supposed to care? And like, I'm glad Felicity's getting time while poor Rose Tico, who should have been tried for war crimes, admittedly, along with Finn, is just sitting there doing nothing. Like, hey, we introduced a couple new characters. What about the ones we got?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow.
Hey, so how about those headlines that are saying, by the way, that was Kathleen Kennedy's idea.
Well, all right.
By the way, just saying, woo.
It
Let's-
would have been great if that had happened at the start of Force Awakens and we felt like we had 3 movies that were part of the same trilogy.
Well,
I mean, I'm all for bringing back Palpatine. Fine. Just make that from the get-go.
I think. Look, I'm here for a good Palpatine cloning story. But then also, isn't there the idea that like that Palpatine in the Lightning Cube has been the Palpatine that's been there forever, and all the other Palpatines that we've ever known from the prequels on are clones of him?
I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I would have loved the idea of what if we started like, oh yeah, Force Awakens, like, oh, it's Palpatine. No, it's actually he cloned himself, and it's not quite Palpatine. It's a clone of Palpatine, which is equally bad. Would have been cool, but different in a way. I mean, great.
I'm here for it. You can do it. I think the big thing is, and ultimately the one thing that can unite all of us is that obviously there was no plan. Like anybody who wants to connect these dots, you're connecting the dots via headcanon because there was no plan. There was no larger story to be told. It was a lot of
Next sentence,
slapdash stuff. Yeah, that happened kind of going on the way, including the idea, and this is my last big nitpick before we get into the larger meta story. The idea that Rey has to be a Palpatine because these are the 2 great houses that have gone back and forth in this 9-movie saga, which bothers me on a fundamental level because one of these houses just kind of got started a few years ago,
Yeah.
and the other's just kind of a guy. Like, it's not a house. We didn't never know Palpatine's dad. We never Palpatine never sat down with Anakin in the prequels and be like, boy, was my father a real slave driver making me read all these Sith manuals. He always wanted me to be the best Sith I could be. And I really made him proud when I struck him down with all my anger. Like, this is family's important, family values for the Palpatines.
Or
Like-
if it's the clone story, it's like, hey, Shiv, I notice it's bring your parent to school day. You're by yourself. No reasons.
Also,
Well,
by the way,
right,
it's implied. If Palpatine is immortal, then when Shmi Skywalker suddenly became pregnant without a father, then I think we can guess who shoved those midichlorians in her.
That's comic book. There's a comic book thing about that it was indeed Palpatine that got her pregnant.
Great. So that means we got another passionate, incestuous kiss. Da 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 da. Weird.
Where can I buy a turkey baster on Tatooine?
Because that would make Ben Solo her cousin. If both of their grandparents, it would make Palpatine the great grandfather of Ben Solo and the grandfather of Rey.
I want the whole scenes with Palpatine and his son. Like, you're a disappointment to me.
Yeah, I don't want any
Dad,
of this.
I just play guitar,
But what I
And that
want,
Wookiee drummer of yours, you're gonna go nowhere with this band.
what I want is to watch Star Wars on TV with small stories told well, which is why
Small
this
word-
week my pick is The Mandalorian, the best and
talking
only
about-
Star Wars property from 2019.
I've been told under good authority that Star Wars is a thing that happened. You can't relive it back. You'll never enjoy it the way you did before because we're growing up. I've been told it's a fact that you can't. Star Wars is sort of done. You can't relive that. You can't have good Star Wars anymore because you've changed.
Well, I would like to introduce you to a little show called The Mandalorian. It's
Right,
me,
don't-
Emperor Palpatine, doing an ad read. I have to pay the bills for my podcast.
Get Disney Plus with Hulu and ESPN Plus now at one great price.
No,
Yeah.
Mandalorian's the future. That's all I want to
Yeah,
watch.
And I'm glad because it's a big shut up to the whole like, it's a kids thing. You're expecting this thing to make you enjoy it like you did. I'm like, no, we just want good storytelling that consistently through characters making the best decisions they're capable of, a universe that's sort of consistent, and a through line. Just give me, that's all I've ever wanted out of Star Wars. It's writing 101.
Yeah.
And Mandalorian did that.
Look, Mandalorian is refreshing, and I would say the second episode was probably the best of the
Yes.
of the series for me. But it was excellent. It was everything that I wanted Star Wars to ever be. It's just a simple story with those elements mixed into it, and a compelling and interesting cast. They did a very credible job. I think that they ended the season strong in tying everything together. I'm pumped to see where it goes from here. But oh my God, it just is such a departure to see, even when it stumbles, to understand like, oh, okay, they're learning. They went in a direction that I wasn't in love with, but guess what? They came back and did another episode that I liked. And whether or not it's great or bad from here, at least I know it's possible.
Yeah, I JC Calhoun, you said it there. It's fine, and some people are weird. Like, I love some episodes. Some episodes I think are cringy. Are just, some of them I think are very poorly written and not really well done. Some of them I thought were great. And overall it's TV and my expectations are different. But there have been, that second episode I thought was fantastic, and I got to the end of it. I'm like, yeah, I would have liked this, but I'm like, I'm watching a Star Wars TV show, and and I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and the idea that it's fine, like, yeah, it's fine. I wish I could say that about the movies. I can't, because the things that frustrate me about the movies are characters making not the best decisions, plotting that goes back and forth, and just, you're so confusing and stuff. Here, if some of it's, scenes go on too long, some things are kind of cringy, and sometimes the editing could be a little bit better, and maybe I don't understand the context, but there's thought went into this.
So, where do we see the future of Star Wars movies?
Oh, you know what?
Do you think that Ryan Johnson trilogy happens?
No.
What about the Penny Hoffman Weiss one?
That was canceled.
Yeah, no, that was the joke. Here's what I think we do: is we build out the back catalog. We see an increasing number of TV shows that increasingly draw on the best parts of the expanded universe novels. We probably get a what's his name? Dude with the red eyes.
Thrawn.
Thrawn, yeah, some kind of Thrawn series or whatever. And then, like, how great will it be 5 years from now when we can excitedly say, holy crap, can you believe it? They're going to make a movie out of Star Wars. Basically, they learn that everything shifts and they adopt the Star Trek role. So they become TV shows and let Star Trek be major media events. We're going to be TV shows telling good stories. And then when we have a new cast of characters, we're going to elevate them to the big screen.
My issue is, like, just bring in good storytellers and you can do whatever you want. That's when people say a franchise should take a break or whatever. I was like, that's not the problem. Isn't the material, or isn't the base material? It's who's telling the stories. Marvel didn't need to take a break because there were bad Marvel movies out there. Marvel needed to get its act together to make better movies, and we've had this amazing run of Marvel Studios. With Star Wars is, if you told me tomorrow that like, hey, you know what, we realized we need a great storyteller slash producer, not just a great producer, but a storyteller slash producer to oversee this thing. Peter Jackson signed on board or something, I'd be excited, you know?
Yeah.
I would be, okay, cool, you know, because he's not Hobbit Peter Jackson, but I just want a great storyteller to come in there and take it over, and I could be very excited and to give it their attention. Part of the problem is that in film, you get showrunners who have had like really good track records and they get brought on, but then they have too many projects at once. I was worried about J.J. Abrams of this because J.J. Abrams is running a whole empire. So I knew we weren't going to get 100% of J.J. Abrams on this. You know, we were going to get J.J. Abrams managing J.J., you know, Bad Robot and everything else, which is different than, you know, a good, solid filmmaker, showrunner, or whatever. It's been 100%. So I'm looking forward to, you know, Deborah Chow. Her episodes haven't been my favorite, but they haven't been the bad ones. And, you know, what she's done on Mandalorian. So she's doing the Obi-Wan series. I'm looking forward to that. I like David Filoni as a person, but his episodes have been far, far the weakest for me on Mandalorian. So he's not exactly somebody I'd want to see running, you know, a bigger part of it at this point.
Let me just say, I understand that these cartoons got a real following to them. And that's fine. If things make sense, bring them into these other elements of Star Wars. But like, don't come at me with 7 episodes of Rebels and Clone Wars that I need to watch so I can understand what is in Giancarlo Esposito's hand. Like, I just make the things make sense. I was fine that he had a crazy sword. Let's just tell me the story about the crazy sword instead of acting like we all understand what's happening.
I just assumed as a player of Knights of the Old Republic that it was just a vibroblade, which is sort of like a middle ground between, not quite a lightsaber, but
yeah,
something that was.
I just thought it was the Star Wars version of the Jaws of Life. It's like, just in case your TIE fighter crashes here, kooky sword to cut your ass out.
Yeah. I think. But you know what I liked about, like, I'd heard, you know, there was sort of some of the backstory in the Darksaber. I'm like, oh, cool. We don't know. That's fine. We'll find out. I don't need to know what it is. It's this thing comes. It's cool.
I was fine with it. I'm just saying to the cartoon people.
Yeah, you know, Brian, we had the vibroblade in there. Remember in the one of the episodes, one of the Mandalorians pulled the vibroblade on the Mando.
Oh,
there's a scene. I did notice the first time I adjusted my setting because they have the fake HDR on it.
Yep.
And if you turn off that fake HDR and go to regular video, you see the blade going vibrating.
Oh, right on. Very cool.
So it's, yeah, and I love those little details like that where you don't have to pay super attention to it, whatever. So, yeah, I think just bring in some great filmmakers. I think that we're going to see the fact that they took all of the movies underneath Kathleen Kennedy away right now kind of tells you that they're looking to go in a different direction with Star Wars.
I think that's my big question. Do we see another Star Wars movie that's produced by Kathleen Kennedy?
No. We see Kathleen Kennedy in the background working on some stuff until 2 years from now she announces that she's so excited to leave Disney for the project that she really has been wanting to do.
We see Kathleen Kennedy making whatever she wants at the pizza buffet. Hooray!
Well, so we don't know, and I know nobody here. We're just joking. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes in Disney and how things are done, because she's got to please, I think, Alan Horn, Bob Iger, all these people do this, whatever. She could have the best laid out plans for how these things are going to go. Ultimately, those decisions were decided on by Bob Iger. Bob Iger approved every single script, everything. I think Bob Iger's an amazing, talented guy, but I don't want to say, oh, she's the reason for my frustration, which some fans are starting to do now. And I can't imagine what it's like to get a movie made there. Every decision has been approved by Iger and stuff. The firings of the majority of the directors from the Star Wars films, which is kind of nerve-wracking. That wasn't her acting alone. This was doing something that with, you know, Iger, et cetera, saying, yes, this is what we need to do. So I can't imagine what her position is like. I have no idea what it's like, because it's not like she gets to say, all right, I'm going to put this thing together and make this thing work. She did her best with like, hey, I'm going to reach out to J.J. Abrams, who at the time was a super fan favorite and seemed like a great lock to, you know, direct Force Awakens and to launch it and whatnot, bringing in the directing pool that she did. Every one of those guys she wanted to bring on board were super talented people.
Top names.
So I don't know, but I do know. But it is like, yeah, they've canceled all the Star Wars films. So as far as what's happening next, Brian, you're probably 100% right.
Yeah, well, and also there are some tea leaves to be read that during the Sony Marvel negotiations for Spider-Man, that there was like there were comments by Sony about, well, Kevin Feige and his new roles that he's going to be taking on, he's going to be too busy with his new roles, and a lot of people read that to be like, oh, X-Men, Fantastic Four, but now he's attached to a Star Wars movie, so we don't know exactly how much, whether or not he is somebody that would be involved going further from an organizational perspective. But also, I mean, hell, Benioff and Weiss were people that I know I've had conversations with Andrew about, like, back maybe in season 5 and 6 of Game of Thrones, we're like, hey, look, two guys that understand what it means to have a constantly running multi-nation machine that is churning out a high quality content. You could look at worse people than those guys for managers.
I want to give a little sort of insight to some of our listeners just to understand that, like, you have showrunners or people who start a show, and as a showrunner, you're generally the head writer. Sometimes you direct, but you bring in the directors. In TV, the showrunner kind of has all the power. It's like a director of a film who also has part producer. Showrunners have a tremendous amount of power. And what happens in the life of a showrunner is you start off as writers for years, maybe writing on other shows. Finally, you get something picked up that becomes a series. You're in position to be showrunner, and you're in charge of this thing. And your life, those first couple seasons, is making that show the best thing that can happen. And if that show takes off, what happens then is you become popular and everybody wants to work with you. And then you get opportunities to make deals all over the town. And then you, as a showrunner, you had one show you're in charge of. Now you're pitching dozens of shows, and maybe you're show running 3 or 4 other projects. Your attention is divided amongst everything else. And what happens then is the showrunner we want may not be the showrunner we get. With Benioff and Weiss, they were supposed to go from Game of Thrones to the whole Confederate States thing with HBO. That didn't happen, but then they made their super big, like, Netflix mega deal. And then at that point, it's like, are these guys the best ones to do Star Wars? Well, no, not if they're not day-to-day doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that happens a lot with showrunners is you go, I love this guy. If they were doing this 100% of their time, it would be awesome. But, the Russo brothers, those guys, look what they've done. And now they're in charge of a ton of things. Will we get another Marvel movie out of them? I don't know.
All right. Well, is there any clean way to wrap this up?
Yeah. What we do is we declare that we did it. We fixed Star Wars. You're welcome.
Yeah. I love the visuals. I thought it was the movie, the visuals were great. Individual moments, individual scenes. There were some really, really fun moments in there. Some moments that made me want to pull my hair out, like Chewie finally getting a medal because Lucas screwed up, but other things I thought were really fun, as long as I didn't ask, why are we here? What happened? What's going on? That this whole movie reminds me of the scene in Force Awakens where Finn asks Han Solo, well, explain to me again why we're here, as they walk into Maz Kanata's castle. Well, you see, plot point, reasons. But there were some beautiful things in this movie. Visually, it was amazing.
In summation, what?
It's been what?
Join me next time on the Chef Palpatine podcast, where my guest will be Elon Musk. Remember, you can place your first 3 bets for free, one with mybookie.com. Last enter code PALPY. It's been after.
All right. Hey, good work, everybody. We have got to clear out. We're bumping up against something else right now. Night Attack. We'll run it at some point tomorrow during the big 24-hour New Year's thing. Cord Killers will be back next week. Light Attack will be live again next week. Weird Things will be back next week. Everybody have a good rest of your 2019.
I just wanted like a Dr. Evil moment with Palpatine's giant chair where it gets stuck. Like, I gotta take a pee. Can somebody get me down from here? I need to get down from here. Hello?
All right, bye, everybody.
Doesn't want you. Yeah, I wanted it so bad that somewhere I lost you. Yeah, this is It's not